Distinguished representatives, I declare open the fourth plenary meeting. Today we will continue consideration of Agenda Item 9, the general debate. States are invited, in accordance with Rule 50 of the Rules of Procedure of the Assembly, to deliver statements of no longer than 5 minutes. In order to assist the speakers with the timely delivery of their statements, a light mechanism was installed at the lectern. In order to accommodate all speakers, this time limit shall be strictly observed. Pursuant to the Bureau decision taken on 7th September 2023, the general debate is scheduled to take place this morning. Furthermore, the Bureau met this morning and allocated additional time to the general debate agenda item, which shall continue this afternoon from 1500 to 1800, and on Monday, 11 December, from 11:30 to 1300. States were able to submit written or pre-recorded statements in lieu of the addition to their in-person statements by December 4th, 2023, for posting on the respective webpage of the Assembly. I would invite delegations to please check the list of speakers dated 7 December 2023 of this morning, available at the conference officer's desk, as there has been multiple changes. Let us proceed immediately with our first speaker, His Excellency Mr. Rati Bregadze, Minister of Justice of Georgia. You have the floor, Excellency.
Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all newly elected judges and wish best of their luck in implementing mandate of such a demanding role they will assume. Georgia, aligning with the statement made on behalf of the European Union, maintains its firm belief in the critical role the International Criminal Court holds in the evolution and preservation of global criminal justice. The expanding scope of the ICC's investigations across various regions of the world underscores the global imperative for accountability and necessitates universal ratification of the Rome Statute. Its essential mandate plays a pivotal role in advancing victims' right to truth and promoting supremacy of justice, which is a foundation for lasting peace. As a founding member of the ICC, Georgia is among its unwavering supporters. Georgia effectively cooperates with the court to enhance its stance, performance, and efficiency in different directions. 15 years have passed since 2008 Russia-Georgia war that made Georgian civilians and military personnel victims of atrocities perpetrated against them. Upon commencement of the investigation by the ICC prosecutor in 2016, the government of Georgia undertook intensive efforts to match the increasing needs of the investigation. As a result of this cooperation, the ICC achieved tangible results. In particular, on 10th of March 2022, the ICC prosecutor lodged an application before the pre-trial chamber for arrest warrants against 3 high officials of the de facto South Ossetian administration for the crimes of unlawful confinement, torture, and inhuman treatment, hostage-taking and unlawful transfer against ethnic Georgian civilians in the context of an occupation by the Russian Federation. On 30th of June 2022, pre-trial chamber delivered the aforementioned arrest warrants. The investigation also uncovered the role of Major General in the armed forces of the Russian Federation and Deputy Commander of the Airborne Forces at the time of the events, who is believed to have intentionally contributed to the execution of some of these crimes and is now deceased. The issuance of arrest warrants was followed by the conclusion of the investigation in the situation of Georgia on 16th of December 2022, attesting that the Georgian side conducted military activities in full compliance with international law. This confirms that the serious violations committed against the Georgian population in 2008 war are attributed to the specific individuals, representatives of the Russian Federation and the separatist regimes. Today, expectations are high in the Georgian people and the international society that the arrest warrants will be executed promptly and that victims of August 2008 war will get the justice they deserve. In this respect, we actively cooperated with the ICC and hope for dynamic coordination among all state parties as well. In conclusion, the government of Georgia expresses its appreciation to the court and reaffirms its willingness to continue cooperation with ICC to ensure justice worldwide. I hereby seize this opportunity to thank Madam President and the whole ACP team for great job they have done during these recent years and wish successful implementation of all objectives to the new President of the ACP. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to the next speaker, His Excellency, Mr. Mario Bucaro Flores, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala. You have the floor.
Madam President, allow me to begin by congratulating you for your excellent work during your mandate. We member states welcome your contributions and we are very grateful for your leadership. We take this opportunity to assure you of the full support of the delegation of Guatemala during this 22nd session of the Assembly in the work that we need to do, primarily the decisions we must adopt. Guatemala extends warm and respectful greetings to the President Judge Piotr Hrabmansky, particularly the first Vice President Magistrate Luz del Carmen Ibáñez Carenza, and the second Vice President Magistrate Antoine Cassia Mduya, as well as the prosecutor, Mr. Karim Khan. We also congratulate the 6 new judges of the ICC who were recently elected for 2024 through 2033. Madam President, this is a very special year for the ICC and for the states parties because we are celebrating the 25th anniversary since the adoption of the Rome Statute, the founding treaty of the court. We welcome the fact that the membership of the ICC has increased to 124 states, and we congratulate Armenia on its upcoming accession to the Rome Statute on the 1st of February 2024. Guatemala reaffirms its unwavering support for the ICC. We are also committed to combating impunity, since the court plays a key role within the international justice system to put an end to impunity for the most serious crimes against humanity worldwide. We are convinced that its very existence and operation acts as a deterrent for those who in other circumstances might believe that their crimes can go unpunished. My delegation welcomes the support and the cooperation between the UN and the ICC, not only because it strengthens dialogue and the relationship between both entities, but also because it serves to give greater visibility to the considerable work done by the ICC. This is an opportunity for the court to secure its authority and to make known its mandate and the importance of cooperation among states. We also call for effective cooperation between states parties with the court to ensure the effective work of the court. And after all, the court's work depends on all of us. Madam President, Guatemala renews its support for the principle of complementarity and strengthening national systems to ensure accountability. We understand that this is a fundamental pillar of the statute and a principle guiding the actions of the court. As we have said earlier, the ICC does not replace national courts because national criminal jurisdictions have precedence and responsibility for investigating and trying those responsible for crimes covered under the statute. The international crimes over which the court has jurisdiction are an intolerable threat to international peace and security. Addressing these issues is part of our imperatives, the imperatives of international law. It is a norm which we must recognize, and we also recognize the complementary role played by the ICC in addressing crimes against humanity. And we see this as the nucleus of the international criminal justice system. We believe that the firm commitment and the support and cooperation that states must give to the court is crucial so that the court's capacity can be increased and ensure timely accountability for crimes, as well as to bring justice to victims and to prevent such crimes in the future. We welcome the efforts carried out by the Office of the Prosecutor of the Court and the Secretariat of the Assembly of States Parties to combat international crime, and we hope to continue with this work, strengthening the jurisdiction, the competence of our national jurisdictions in the maintenance of order. In conclusion, combating impunity is a goal for all states parties to the Rome Statute. We call for redoubled efforts to support this international regime so that we can effectively reduce impunity and consolidate and build international peace and security among states. I would conclude my statement by reiterating our commitment and our support to the court and to each of its bodies, its leadership in your person, including the work being done by this assembly, and we congratulate each and every one of you for your commitment to fight for peace and justice. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to the next speaker, Her Excellency Ms. Leonor Zalabata Torres, Permanent Representative to the United Nations of Colombia. You have the floor, Excellency.
Señora Presidenta.
Distinguished President of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute, Madame de Gourmendi, Madam President, the ICC, to the President of the Court, and to the Prosecutor Karim Khan, and to Osvaldo Salvada. This 22nd Assembly of the States Parties to the Rome Statute brings to an end a year full of challenges for the international system. This was a difficult year with a number of crises which challenged some of the most basic principles underpinning the international legal system, but we also questioned our own values as humanity. The ICC has a particularly relevant responsibility in this context to ensure that when the limits of the law are crossed, the victims of the most serious crimes and crimes of interest for the international community can have access to justice, in particular in circumstances where national institutions are unable to safeguard these rights, which are fundamental. Madam President, unfortunately, my country has lived through such circumstances because of a conflict that went on for more than half a century, where some of the main players forgot the most basic principles of humanity. But for more than a quarter of a century, we have sought solutions, and in the previous decade, we were able to arrive at an agreement which focused on the victims the Truth, Justice, and Non-Repetition Committee was established to ensure peace in my country. This court was set up thanks in part to the active support of the ICC, ensuring that it was in line with the purposes and principles of the Rome Statute. Today, this body is investigating 11 smaller cases, including the situation the cases of some 820,000 victims, sanctioning those who are most responsible for the very serious crimes of armed conflict in Colombia. The actions of this court are genuine and effective. The prosecutor of the ICC decided to close the preliminary review considering the situation in our country since 2004. That appeared in the report published on the 30th of November. Madam President, the end to the preliminary review in Colombia did not mark an end to the relationship between our country and the ICC. On the contrary, cooperation and complementarity between our country and the ICC have increased in recent months. In fact, Colombia's prosecutor has set up a work plan in June to organize its many activities. And in August of this year, for example, our court had the special advisor on gender persecution from the ICC involved in gender-based and sex crimes. In addition to that, in March and November of 2023, a number of judges from the Special Jurisdiction for Peace visited The Hague and organized a number of exchanges with the prosecutor's team and with other court authorities. Madam President, this new phase in the relationship between the ICC and Colombia promises to be very beneficial for both parties. On the one hand, the presence of the court in Colombia remains key to ensure that national jurisdictions, including the JEP in our country, continue with their work, approved by the national government and other democratic institutions working in our country. And on the other hand, the peace laboratory which we have set up in Colombia has led to a number of results, such as the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, and it represents considerable step forward for humanity. And there, we believe that this experience could be replicated elsewhere. The constant involvement of the ICC with our institutions can enrich not just the judicial proceedings which currently are taking place in our courts, but it can have a positive impact on interactions with victims. For that reason, the President of the Republic, Gustavo Petro, has requested the prosecuting Karen Kam to open an office in Colombia in order to facilitate this exchange. And in this way, we hope to move forward with the dual task, on the one hand, of continuing to our own struggle to build total peace, and on the other hand, to show the world the immense value of what we have been able to build so far as we work to consolidate peace and show that we are a country of peace. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to the next speaker, His Excellency Mr. Alexander Marshik, Permanent Representative of Austria to the United Nations. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, Austria aligns itself with the statement of Spain on behalf of the European Union, and I would like to add a couple of points. First, my delegation would like to congratulate the newly elected president. We, of course, also want to thank the outgoing president, Ms. Silvia Fernandez de Gurmendi, and the outgoing bureau as well, for all the hard work that they have undertaken to advance the ICC. And while we're in this business of thanking and congratulating, let me also congratulate the newly elected judges and express our gratitude to all those judges that have finished their terms. And let me also congratulate the new registrar, Mr. Osvaldo Zavala Aguilera, on his appointment, and thank the previous registrar, Mr. Peter Lewis, for his work. Colleagues, over the past year, we've seen some real progress in strengthening the Rome Statute system. Austria commends the court for the distinct progress in the Ukraine investigations. The arrest warrants against President Putin and Ms. Lvova-Belova are an important first step towards justice for the thousands of children that became victims of the illegal aggression of Russia against Ukraine. The Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, with its seat in Vienna, has collected ample evidence of horrendous crimes committed by Russian forces in Ukraine. The court's work is indispensable in holding accountable the persons responsible for those crimes. Austria also welcomes Armenia's ratification of the Rome Statute. With 124 states parties, the club of the Rome Statute is growing again. We should use this momentum to reinforce our efforts in advocating for real universality. And then looking ahead in the course of this ASP, we are also set to accomplish important milestones for the court. We're pleased that we will adopt the permanent due diligence process and a new legal aid policy. These are important tools for the court, and we wish to thank all those who worked hard in preparing them. Madam President, the challenges that the court is facing are manifold and they are diverse. Austria strongly condemns any threats or attacks against the court and its staff. The cyber operations against the court, as well as the arrest warrants against the court officials, are unacceptable. Our commitment to the ICC remains unwavering, and together with other states parties, we will defend it, and we stand firmly with its officials and personnel. With 4 ongoing trials and 17 situations spanning over 4 continents, the court's workload is heavy. Yet, this is likely to further increase in the coming months and years. To fulfill its mission, the court needs the support of all states parties and the international community at large. In particular, it's paramount that states parties honor their obligations to fully cooperate with the court, including by executing arrest warrants and observing the non-essential contacts policy. Given the threats against the court, states should show their support by ratifying the agreement on the privileges and immunities of the court. We also need to provide the court and the trust fund for victims with sufficient resources to carry out their invaluable work. In this regard, we call on all states parties to pay contributions to the regular budget on time. For our part, Austria has tried to step up the support for the court. Since the beginning of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, we made voluntary financial contributions to the trust fund of the Office of the Prosecutor, amounting to 400,000 euros, and we've seconded a legal expert. And for next year, we're planning to pay a further voluntary contribution and second another legal expert. This year, Austria also increased its contribution to the Trust Fund for Victims and contributed to the Trust Fund for Family Visits. Madam President, this year marks the 25th anniversary of the Rome Statute. In order to commemorate this anniversary, but also to prepare for the review of the Kampala amendments on the crime of aggressions in 2025, the University of Vienna, with the support of the Austrian MFA, organized the Vienna Conference on Amendments on 6 and 7 October, which reflected the possible options to amend the Rome Statute. Austria strongly supports the continuation of these discussions during the next year in order to prepare for the review in 2025. Today, as our international order based on international law is increasingly challenged, the Court remains a beacon of hope for maintaining the rule of law. I assure you that Austria will continue to do its utmost to support the Court. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to the next speaker, Ms. Meritel Font Villagines, Deputy Permanent Representative of Andorra to the United Nations. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Andorra is honoured to participate in the 22nd session of the Assembly of States Parties to the International Criminal Court. First and foremost, we would like to congratulate the newly elected President, and we would like to recognise and thank the enormous work carried out by Her Excellency Silvia Fernandez de Gourmendi. The Principality of Andorra, as a small-sized country, owes its survival to the existence of international legal rules and the respect thereof. Therefore, since the Rome Statute was drafted, Andorra has supported the Court and has supported initiatives to improve it, be they driven by states parties, proposed by practitioners, or called for by civil society. Whilst we commemorate its 25th anniversary, we still believe in this institution as the best instrument to try perpetrators of the most serious crimes which affect the whole of the international community, and also as the best instrument for combating impunity. We'd like to underscore once again that the Court is also a crucial instrument for providing protection, assistance and reparation to victims. This approach is one of the very foundations of the existence of the Court, and it should help to build trust, and the Court should inspire this by providing justice to victims. The Principality of Andorra supports the activities of the Trust Fund for Victims through annual voluntary contributions. This fund focuses on gender perspectives and on combating violence against children, or rather our contributions do so. Andorra stands shoulder to shoulder with the ICC, which is independent and impartial. We deplore all threats and attacks and all actions that seek to undermine its credibility and legitimacy. Madam President, Andorra supports the work to improve transparency and effectiveness, and also to guarantee the selection of the best candidates, the most qualified. We would like to congratulate the 6 new judges who've just been elected and wish them every success as they carry out their significant responsibilities. We'd also like to thank all candidates who stood at the election. The judges, and through them all of the Court, embody the collective commitment to combat impunity for the most serious international crimes. It's also their duty to provide reparation orders for victims and their families, thus enabling them to meet their needs for protection and assistance. My country is convinced that the ICC represents an opportunity to build peace for the whole international community, which needs to continue to be supported unfailingly.
Quisiera destacar también.
Excellencies, I would also like to focus on the need to ensure that we have a truly universal and fully multilingual court, which will facilitate dialogue between the Court's investigation teams and national judicial authorities of states where these crimes have been committed and should be prosecuted in a spirit of cooperation. A court respectful of multilingualism will guarantee transparency and accessibility and highlight the diversity of legal traditions, the common will to serve justice, and ensure effective participation of victims and the right to exercise and the exercise of their rights. Moreover, to maintain the goal of achieving universality of the Rome Statute, to achieve a court which has genuine universal jurisdiction, we would invite states to ratify the statute and recognize that in order to achieve this goal, we must promote trust and make known the work of the court, its goals and its challenges, and to see the court as one of last resort. We welcome Armenia as a new member of the court. We would also call for the ratification of the amendments to the Rome Statute, as well as universal accession to the Agreement on Privileges and Immunities of the Court, which is an essential benchmark for guaranteeing its proper functioning. The ICC is an impartial and independent benchmark for the international community in combating impunity and serving justice and ensuring reparations for the most serious crimes. Its role has proven to be more necessary than ever before. We also recognize the important role of the prosecutor in drafting policies on sexual crimes, gender-based violence, and crimes against children. The states parties to the Rome Statute are part of a system which requires the participation of everyone, each and every member of the UN, so that justice will prevail in the face of the most serious crimes, to ensure peace and to acknowledge the victims. For all of these reasons, the Principality of Andorra will continue to support the ICC. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to the next speaker, His Excellency Mr. Brandon Rogers, Ambassador to the Kingdom of the Netherlands and Permanent Representative to the International Criminal Court of Ireland. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Madam Vice President, good to see you again. Ireland associates itself with the statement made earlier on behalf of the European Union and its member states. And like many colleagues, I wish to begin by expressing Ireland's sincere gratitude to outgoing President Fernández de Gourméndez for her personal commitment and integrity throughout her presidency. And of course, a warm Céad Míle Fáilte, as we say in Ireland. Congratulations to incoming President Pavi Kukaranta, who I've had the pleasure of working with before and look forward to working with her now for the next 3 years. Also important to take the opportunity to thank the outgoing judges for their service and important contributions. In particular, I think we're grateful to outgoing President Judge Hofmanski, whose leadership of the court through many challenges has been a great source of stability. And of course, we welcome the election of 6 new judges who will undoubtedly make a very significant contribution to the success of the Rome Statute system over the coming years. And of course, goodbye to former Registrar Peter Lewis, and hello to Osvaldo Gila as well. Thank you. Madam Vice President, this past year has been a significant one for the ICC in many ways. Only 5 months ago, many of us were gathered here at the UN headquarters to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute. We reaffirmed our support for the court and reflected upon how far the ICC has progressed its vital mandate to end impunity and ensure justice for the victims of the most serious crimes of international concern. Despite having to negotiate the inevitable growing pains inherent in such an ambitious project, the ICC has matured into the cornerstone of the international system of justice. The progress achieved by the court in implementing its mandate is evident in the recent expansion of its workload, both at its headquarters in The Hague and its investigations in the field. Since 2021, the prosecutor has opened or resumed investigations in 4 situations: Palestine, the Philippines, Venezuela, and Ukraine. And this work continues. A high number of cases are reaching trial stage, and there have been a number of appeals, judgments, and reparations proceedings. The ability of the court to pursue its mandate consistently across all situations without fear or favour is fundamental to its continued legitimacy in the eyes of victims and the international community. This requires adequate resourcing. Madam Vice President, sadly, the court's recent pursuit of its mandate has drawn the ire of certain states, not parties to the statute, and by powerful individuals who are threatened by denial of impunity. Ireland condemns the proliferation of threats against the ICC, its staff, and those who cooperate with the court. We're extremely concerned by the recent cybersecurity incident, as well as criminal proceedings against ICC judges and the prosecutor initiated by Russia. These acts are attacks against the independence and impartiality of the court and are an affront to the rule of law. It is important that states parties publicly defend and support the court with respect to its work in all situations, including those situations where it not be politically convenient to do so. But the court needs more than our political support in these challenging times. Crucially, it needs sufficient resources to operate efficiently and effectively. Ireland urges all states party at this Assembly to agree a budget that will ensure that all situations before the court receive the resources that victims deserve, and that will enable the court to withstand the security threats it is facing, to ensure that it has the capacity to apply its mandate consistently. We consider the proper resourcing of the court to be of the utmost importance. Madam Vice President, victims have been at the heart of the Rome Statute system from the very beginning. Nowhere is this more evident than in the invaluable work of the Trust Fund for Victims. Ireland has been a consistent annual contributor to the Trust Fund, contributing over 3.3 million to date. We continue to encourage all states parties that have not yet contributed to the fund to consider doing so in the future. We reiterate our strong commitment to the universality of the Rome Statute. I would therefore like to welcome the fact that Armenia has very recently ratified the statute and will soon become the 124th member of this Assembly. If we wish to achieve a truly universal system of international criminal justice, one that leaves no gaps for impunity, it is essential that the court has as wide and diverse a membership as possible. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is Her Excellency Ms. Ana Jiménez de la Hoz, Deputy Permanent Representative of Spain to the United Nations. You have the floor, Madam.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, distinguished Vice President. It is an honor for me to speak to the Assembly of States Parties. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to do this on behalf of the EU, and I would like to make a few additional comments today in my national capacity. I'd like to begin by recalling and remembering the victims, in particular the Spanish citizens, Ivan Yarramandi and Mayor Villalobos, who died in Gaza and Israel, respectively, and Maria Hernandez and Emma Igual, who were killed while they were carrying out humanitarian work in Ethiopia and Ukraine. They are a few of the dozens of humanitarian workers who have lost their lives saving human beings in armed conflicts. For them and for all the victims of atrocious crimes, the International Criminal Court, International Criminal Justice System, in particular the ICC, is needed more than ever. Spain remains firmly committed to this court as a founding pillar for rules-based international order, and our voluntary contributions, therefore, this year so far in 2023 have reached 6 million euros. In this year, when we are celebrating the 25th anniversary since the adoption of the Rome Statute, the court is at a crucial period, not without challenges, but there are also opportunities. The main challenge is universality for the statute. Like many others, we welcome the ratification of Armenia, and we encourage all other states which are not yet parties to the statute to ratify the statute and its amendments. Moreover, we have seen an increase in the court's workload, in fact, an unprecedented increase. The prosecutor has pending cases in almost every region of the world, and Spain has increased its financial support and human resources support so that the court can effectively do its work. We have just adopted a special contribution for the Office of the Prosecutor amounting to 3 million euros, and we are going to begin cooperation in the area of human resources as well by providing inter alia JPOs to the Office of the Prosecutor. Cooperation between among states parties of the statute and non-states parties based on the principle of complementarity and coordination with the court and other international accountability mechanisms are vital for improving the work of the court. Spain has signed in December of 2022 an agreement on the enforcement of sentences with the court, and we support all complementary accountability initiatives in the court. We are supporters of the establishment of more prosecutors' offices in the field so that the prosecutor can bring his work to the affected communities, improve the collection of evidence, and subsequently the results of investigations. Madam President, we would like to condemn most emphatically external threats and attacks against the staff of the court and its operations, including the cyber attack in September, which undermines the work of the court and all of those who are cooperating with it, and we call for full respect for the impartiality of the court. In the annual report of 2022, the prosecutor referred to the need to give the court more modern technology. Our special contribution to the Trust Fund for technological tools, psychosocial support, and specialized training in the area of sexual and gender-based crimes and crimes against children is specifically for that purpose. In the current context of backsliding in the rights of women in various parts of the world, I would focus on the fact that in recent years, the prosecutor's office has perceived gender persecution as a crime against humanity. Spain supports a court based on geographic diversity, representation of the main legal systems, gender equality, and multilingualism. That is seen in our contribution this year as we promote Spanish in the institution. Finally, I would like to conclude with the same idea with which I began this statement, that is, remembering the victims. We cannot have justice without full compensation for victims, and for that reason, Spain will continue to support the Victims' Trust Fund. We have approved a special contribution of €2 million for that purpose. Distinguished Vice President, in this year, when we are also commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we must reassert the existence of the court as a guarantor for justice and dignity for all peoples. The establishment of the court seemed impossible decades ago, but 25 years later, it is our duty as the international community to bolster the court's work. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Maurizio Massari, Permanent Representative of Italy to the United Nations. You have the floor, Excellency.
Madam President, Italy aligns itself with the statement delivered by the representative of Spain on behalf of the European Union, and would like to provide some additional remarks in a national capacity. At the outset, I wish to thank President Fernández de Gurmendi for her very able and dedicated leadership of the Assembly of the States Parties over the past 3 years, and congratulate Ambassador Cacoranta on the election as a new president for the period 24-26. I also wish to congratulate the new judges of the court. In its capacity of newly elected member of the Bureau, for which we thank the membership, Italy is fully committed to assisting this Assembly in fulfilling its high responsibilities in line with my country's long-standing support for the International Criminal Court. Madam President, 2023 has certainly been an eventful year for the Court. The 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute has been marked by a number of commemorative initiatives, including the event held in New York in July and the symposium hosted by the Syracuse International Institute for Criminal Justice and Human Rights in October. As host country of the 1998 Diplomatic Conference, Italy has been particularly pleased to contribute to these meaningful initiatives, which have offered an invaluable opportunity to take stock of past achievements and reflect on the future of the court. Over the past 25 years, the ICC has become a central pillar of the international criminal justice system based on principles of complementarity, cooperation, and ultimately accountability. In recent times, its investigative and judicial workload has been steadily growing, and this is a testament to the enduring and increasing relevance of the court. At this critical juncture, states parties have a compelling duty to assist the court to effectively carry out its mandate, while rigorously respecting its independence. The Assembly should continue to equip the court with adequate and sustainable resources. Italy, as one of the largest contributors to the regular budget, will continue to do its part. State parties must also protect the court from unacceptable attempts to question its integrity and undermine its independence. In this regard, we condemned any threat or act of intimidation against the court and its officials. Likewise, we are concerned by the recent cyber attacks aimed to disrupt the functionality and the security of the court. We also reiterate our concern about the challenges that the court continues to face in relation to its request for cooperation and recall the obligations incumbent upon state parties to cooperate fully with the court in the investigation and prosecution of crimes within its jurisdiction. Non-state parties, too, are under an obligation to cooperate fully with the court in those situations referred to the court by the UN Security Council. Looking ahead, the universalization of the Rome Statute remains a critical factor in the fight against impunity for the perpetrators of the most serious crimes. Closing the universality gap, including on the crime of aggression, through the ratification of the Kampala Amendments, is key to bridging the accountability gap. We therefore welcome Armenia as a new state party and encourage other states to accede to the statutes. Madam President, victims of international crimes across the globe turn to the ICC as their best hope for justice and redress. Italy supports the focus on victims' rights and participation promoted by the court. It is in this spirit that we have supported the Trust Fund for Victims through regular voluntary contributions. To conclude, Madam President, the Court plays a critical role in strengthening and enforcing the rule of law in international relations. In a world still plagued by violence, conflict, and gross violations of human rights, the principles and values of underpinning the Court, which are enshrined in the statute, are as relevant today as 25 years ago. Italy therefore reiterates its firm commitment to upholding these principles, supporting the court, and promoting the cause of justice. And I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. The next speaker is Her Excellency Ms. Alicia Guadalupe Buenrostro Macié, Ambassador and Chargé d'Affaires of the Permanent Mission of Mexico to the United Nations. You have the floor, Excellency.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Distinguished judges and officials of the ICC, representatives of civil society. My country, Mexico, would like to recognize the hard work and the professionalism of all the bodies of the ICC in carrying out their mandate, as well as your commitment to the values enshrined in the Rome Statute. My delegation also recognizes your great capacity to respond promptly and quickly to global challenges, including to the attacks which the court was subject to this year. We congratulate the new president of the Assembly of States Parties and the recently elected judges. You have the support of Mexico in carrying out your tasks. We also express our deep thanks to the President and the Vice Presidents for their outstanding leadership. Mexico wishes to express its firm support for the ICC, and at the same time we firmly condemn attacks against the court, such as the arrest warrants against the President of the court, against some judges, and against the prosecutor Karim Khan. Undoubtedly, these actions are a direct affront to their legitimacy, autonomy, independence, and they impact the full, unfettered functioning of their work. These attacks deserve condemnation by all member states. As to the cyber attack against the court, we must investigate and clarify who is responsible so that we can prevent similar actions in the future. Mexico expresses its support for the work of Prosecutor Karim Khan and his team in carrying out investigations. The prosecutor's office has applied by the principle of complementarity as enshrined in the Rome Statute. My country recognizes the way in which that principle has been applied in the communications we received in accordance with Article 15 in situations under consideration and in pending cases in the court. The political context in which the prosecutor's office is currently working is unique. There are active conflicts where crimes are being committed that are covered under the Rome Statute, and that is obvious, such as in situations in Ukraine and in the state of Palestine. Mexico reiterates its condemnation of the aggression carried out by the Russian Federation against Ukraine, and we look forward to the progress in the ongoing investigations. As in other cases, such as the situation in Ukraine, the court offers an opportunity to avoid impunity. My country also condemns the terrorist attacks on the 7th of October against Israel by Hamas and other terrorist organizations in Gaza. While some kidnapped victims have been released, it is particularly disturbing that hostilities have resumed. Mexico calls for the immediate and unconditional release of the remaining hostages in their care, and including a Mexican national. We also call for an immediate and lasting cessation of hostilities throughout the occupied Palestinian territory. In particular, we condemn direct or indirect attacks against the civilian population as well as against essential infrastructure by all parties in the conflict, all of which could be deemed war crimes. Mexico welcomes a comprehensive and definitive political solution to the conflict under the premise of two states, which addresses the legitimate security concerns of Israel and allows for the building of a state of Palestine which is politically and economically viable, which would live side by side with Israel within safe and internationally recognized borders in accordance with relevant UN resolutions. Similarly, we must not forget that there are other situations before the court. All of them remind us the importance of ensuring universality for the Rome Statute system so that the ICC can investigate and prosecute the crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, crimes of aggression, and to make sure that those responsible do not go unpunished. We welcome Armenia, which has deposited its instrument of ratification just a few weeks ago and is now state party number 124. We invite countries which have not yet done so to ratify or to accede to the statute as soon as possible. We are also pleased that on the 20th of January, to inform you that on the 20th of January, Mexico deposited our instrument of ratification to the amendments to Article 8 of the Rome Statute, in particular those adopted in Kampala in 2010 and in New York in 2017 on various types of weapons and on biological agents. Madam President, like other states parties, Mexico is committed to strengthening the ICC and will do everything possible to meet the need for resources for the bodies of the court. It is clear that we must all redouble our efforts as well as find savings and efficiencies and do more with available resources. Turning to the review process and the mechanism created for that purpose, Mexico welcomes the progress achieved, and we are grateful to the coordinators of the mechanism, Ambassadors Michael Canu and Paul Van Ysel. It is no small feat that they've carried out the evaluation of 384 independent expert review recommendations. And finally, Madam Vice President, one pending matter before the court is achieving equitable geographic representation in its staffing, as well as achieving gender equality and adequate representation of the main legal systems of the world. Necessary efforts must be carried out along these lines. We welcome the strategies put forward by Registrar Osvaldo Zavala for that purpose, as well as the considerations put forward by the Office of the Prosecutor. In conclusion, Mexico reiterates its support for the ICC, for the victims and communities affected by international crimes. 25 years after the adoption of the Rome Statute, we have a more solid, impartial, and independent institution. We will continue to work for the universality of the statute and continue to cooperate with the court with the sole purpose of ending impunity for the most atrocious crimes. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to the next speaker, Ms. Tanja von Uslar-Gleichen, Director General for Legal Affairs at the Federal Foreign Office of Germany. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Let me first and foremost thank the outgoing President, Silvia Fernandez de Gormendi, the Vice Presidents, and the entire Bureau for their invaluable contribution they have made to this Assembly of State Parties in the past 3 years. It has been a great honor and pleasure to work with you in this capacity. On behalf of Germany, I would like to thank the ASP President and Vice Presidents for their strong and expert leadership and the thoughtful and considerate manner in which they have chaired this August Assembly. I would also like to use the opportunity to congratulate the incoming presidency, especially Ambassador Päivi Kaukoranta of Finland as President-elect, and to wish her and her team the very best of success in her work in the coming 3 years. Finally, I would like to congratulate the 6 new judges of the ICC we elected at this State Assembly. It is to them we look to uphold international criminal justice, to end impunity, to hold individual perpetrators responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, or the crime of aggression, and to bring justice to the victims. Madam Vice President, the International Criminal Court is at a crucial moment in its still young history. Only in July did we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the ICC here at the UN headquarters, and we can justly be proud of its achievements. It was a monumental step for justice when the Rome Statute was agreed. However, we need to make sure that the ICC is in a position to respond to the increasing challenges to international criminal justice. Germany aligns itself with the statement made by the EU, and please allow me to make 5 more points. First, we are faced in a world of multiple crises. This is reflected in the increasing importance and workload of the court. Politics now more than ever turn to the ICC for accountability, justice, and to end impunity, to respond to horrible crimes beyond word. Justice matters. International criminal law matters. Justice is rightly expected to be served by the ICC. With the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, the Gaza conflict, and the most serious situation in the Middle East, the court and its assembly must answer to fundamental questions of international criminal law. One of these questions, of course, is, does the Rome Statute and do the Kampala amendments already contain a sufficient response to the crime of aggression? Or must we not undertake the effort to review the Rome Statute and possibly the Kampala amendments for it to more adequately respond to an act of aggression against one of the state parties? Germany has answered that question in the affirmative. We must undertake this effort to not only further develop the Rome Statute, but to ultimately strengthen international criminal law and hence the ICC. As you are aware, Germany is in favor of an in-depth discussion on this issue among state parties, well ahead of the review of the Kampala amendments that this Assembly foresaw for 2025, which is 7 years after the decision to activate the court's jurisdiction over the crime of aggression. We're also aware and engaged of other aspects of reform of the Rome Statute. We call upon all state parties to participate in this discussion, and we will gladly contribute ourselves. Second, for the court to fully exercise its functions, it is of the utmost importance that it be protected from all external threats. We condemn in the most strongest terms any attack on the court, especially the cyber attacks the court had to experience recently and the threats made to its independent judges by means of Russian arrest warrants. As state parties, we must stand together to protect the court from all such threats. The security of the court's IT system and infrastructure and the protection of confidential data, inter alia, evidence and personal information of the court's employees and witnesses have to be assured as priority. Third, we welcome the broadest possible support for the court and its Assembly of State Parties, and as such welcome Armenia as a new member state. The ICC benefits from a balanced regional and geographic representation, the balance of gender, and the just contribution of state parties allocated to the court. As Assembly of State Parties, it is our responsibility to provide the court with the means, the personnel, and the financial resources, and above all, the political will and support it needs to deliver justice and end impunity. Fourth, the perspective of the victims in receiving justice is complementary to the perpetrators being brought to justice. To this end, the court's victim-centered approach remains of the essence. In order to foster this approach and to lend support to the victims of crimes committed, Germany has been a long-standing contributor to the Trust Fund for Victims. Today, we're especially glad that we could support the reparations in the Kantanga case, which were successfully concluded. And finally, it is our declared and common goal as state parties to establish the International Criminal Court as a beacon of international justice. That requires inter alia efficient proceedings. To that end, it is of fundamental importance to strike the right balance between broad investigations and the output of indictments and charges so that verdicts can be rendered in due time. Justice delayed can amount to justice denied. Therefore, as state parties, we must do our utmost to equip the court with all means to achieve justice in a timely and effective manner. Germany stands ready to support the court in all endeavors to that noble goal. Madam Vice Presidency, from the very beginning, Germany has been a staunch supporter of the International Criminal Court, politically, financially, and with personnel. We will continue to do so and remain convinced that this court will find the right answers to the many challenges of a world in turmoil, and it can deliver peace and justice. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is Her Excellency Ms. Vibeke Pasternak-Jørgensen, Ambassador and Undersecretary for Legal Affairs, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Excellencies. I'm honored to be able to address this 22nd Assembly of States Parties, where we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute. This is indeed an opportunity to reflect on the achievements thus far and to define our goals for the future of the court. Denmark aligns itself fully with the statement delivered by the European Union. The ICC remains a crucial part of upholding the rules-based international order and is a key actor in the fight against impunity. This is as important now as it has ever been. The world is faced with extraordinary many challenges due to war and conflict. As a result, the court is met with increasing demands and expectations. Meanwhile, the ICC, its judges, and its staff continue to face unacceptable attacks and threats. It is therefore vital that state parties continue to support the ICC in every possible way to ensure that perpetrators of the most serious international crimes are held to account. To this end, Denmark has decided to increase its financial support to the court further and will make a public announcement to this end in the near future. Madam President, it is our hope that a dialogue-based approach and a well-managed and results-oriented court will eventually lead to universal membership of the court. In that regard, I want to thank the review mechanism for its excellent work and guidance in the past years. In Denmark, we believe that the assessment part of the review mechanism ought to be finalized. We should start to look ahead. We need an implementation phase that is efficient, inclusive, and transparent. The Rome Statute is based on the principle of complementarity. It is important to refine the balance between national jurisdictions and the court, and we call on states to adopt national legislation based on the Rome Statute to ensure effective cooperation with the court, as well as the domestic prosecution of crimes under the jurisdiction of the court. Denmark recently established a committee on the independent criminalization of torture, war crimes, and crimes against humanity into Danish national legislation. The committee is also carefully considering the potential Danish ratification of the Kampala amendments, and we expect a government position to be announced in the beginning of the new year. Madam President, let me conclude by renewing our commitment to the court's effectiveness, its independence and integrity. The fight against impunity is as crucial now as ever. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Edbold Vorshilov, Permanent Representative of Mongolia to the United Nations. You have the floor, Excellency.
Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. At the outset, let me congratulate the President, two Vice Presidents, and other members of the Bureau on the election for the 23rd to 25th session of the Assembly of the State Parties. In July 2023, we have celebrated 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. This milestone recognized the transformation of the court from an institution dealing with just a few investigations and very limited court proceedings into an extremely busy entity active all around the world. Mongolia recognized the International Criminal Court's commitment to continuous improvement as evidenced by its 2023-2025 strategic plan and Office of the Prosecutor's new policy on the crime of gender persecution. While we commend these steps, we also note that court's workload, challenges, as well as complex cases in a difficult environment. We further recognize and welcome the court's adherence to the principle of the complementarity and support the OTP's draft policy on complementarity and cooperation. Furthermore, we encourage the fostering of partnership and technical assistance among states, International Criminal Court, international organizations, and civil society to build and enhance the internal capacities of the states for the investigation and prosecution of the international crimes. As an advocate for effective victim participation in the court proceedings, Mongolia commends the ICC's dedication to victims, particularly through the Trust Fund for Victims, which has positively impacted nearly 17,000 individuals. Nevertheless, we also recognize that consistent financial backing is essential for the sustained operations. With this in mind, we urge member states to diversify funding mechanisms to explore collaborative partnership to enhance Trust Fund for Victims. Madam President, recognizing the inevitability of cooperation with one or more states to successfully investigate and prosecute serious crimes, Mongolia joined the Mutual Legal Assistance Initiative and is a core group member along with Argentina, Belgium, Netherlands, Senegal, and Slovenia. By joining the Mutual Legal Assistance Initiative and later the Ljubljana, The Hague Convention, we have broadened the scope of our international legal assistance and extradition. This has enabled us to cooperate directly with states in a faster and much more efficient way for the prosecution of the most serious international crimes. Mongolia intends to participate in the signing conference for the Ljubljana and Hague Convention, expected to be held in Hague, Netherlands in February 2024. Taking this opportunity, I call on the other members to attend the convention signing conference and ratify the Ljubljana Hague Convention. Madam President, Mongolia believes that threats to multilateralism emerge when states directly challenge, ignore, and undermine international law and international organizations such as the International Criminal Court. In a world where international law is compromised, small states become vulnerable. This vulnerability positions of small states as a natural defenders of the international law that safeguards their sovereignty and well-being. This is one of the reasons Mongolia has nominated our judicial candidate to the International Criminal Court for the term of 2024 and 2033. I would like to congratulate the newly elected 6 judges of the International Criminal Court and extend my best wishes for their important endeavors in putting an end to impunity and establishing rule of law. An important and challenging work lies ahead of you as you aspire to enforcing the accountability for the most heinous crimes under the jurisdiction of the Rome Statute. We thank all the member states who have extended their valuable support to Mongolian candidate. It is our strong belief that the presence of Mongolian judge in the chambers of the ICC will undoubtedly contribute to the universality of the ICC. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Diamane Diome, Deputy Permanent Representative of Senegal to the United Nations. You have the floor.
Madame la Présidente, Excellent.
Madam President, Excellencies, it is a great honour and privilege for me to convey my country, Senegal's message today during this 22nd session of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute of the ICC. This completes the commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the adoption of this founding text of the court. I would like to pay a great tribute to Ms. Silvia Fernandez de Gourmende, President of the ASP, for the wonderful services to the court. And I would also like to assure Madam Paivi Kaukoranda, incoming President of Senegal's full support in carrying out her future mandate. I would also like to congratulate Ambassadors Michael Imran Kanu of Sierra Leone and Margarete Kasanganga of Poland, elected vice presidents, and all of the Bureau. I would also like to congratulate all those new judges elected for the 2024-2033 period, whilst addressing my encouragements to those candidates that were not chosen. The primary international criminal jurisdiction, the ICC's role is to prosecute in the most serious international crimes, the crimes of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes of aggression. By conferring on the ICC this very important mission, the international community not only showed its collective desire to combat impunity for the perpetrators of crimes, mass crimes, and punishing them commensurate with their serious nature, but to send a clear message as well to those people who and to support victims of atrocities. There have been we see that it's absolutely crucial to bear in mind that behind the crimes stipulated in the Rome Statute and codified in international law, there are human beings, women, children, old persons who were massacred during international and interstate conflicts. This is why the dramatic situation that has occurred since the 7th of October requires a particular action from the Office of the Prosecutor, so that violations of international law and international humanitarian law, whoever the perpetrators be, do not remain unpunished. In an absence of a ceasefire and given recent developments in the OPT, including in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, Senegal would urge the occupying power to comply with international law and to demonstrate restraint and save civilians, and to protect medical and media structures, and also all the civilian infrastructure on which 2.2 million people defend. As the first country to have ratified the Rome Statute, Senegal symbolically showed its full support for the ICC and its commitment to protect the promotion of the most fundamental human rights through international criminal justice. The accession of our states to this international legal instrument conveys our shared desire to make the International Criminal Court a strong, resilient, independent and impartial jurisdiction that can fully carry out its mandate in the best way possible. This is why we need to protect the court, its officials and all staff from any intimidation or threats seeking to hamper the exercise of their duties. By drawing from the lessons learnt since the institution was set up, we're convinced that achieving the aims of the court is possible as long as necessary conditions at all required levels are fulfilled. From this standpoint, it's important for the court to be able to have good quality human resources whilst assuring fair geographical representation at all different levels. These two requirements can be reconciled as long as the geographical areas within the ASP have the necessary qualified, experienced human resources that can effectively service the court. Fair geographical representation is not just a legal requirement that the relevant provisions of the Rome Statute explicitly highlight, but also are key for strengthening the very legitimacy of the court and its ability to talk to a world in its entirety, to be understood and heard. The court should continue to improve its practices and its procedures to be more effective and to speed up its work. I'm therefore delighted with the serious work that's been carried out by the Independent Committee of Experts, the review body into the functioning of the ICC, and which is formulating recommendations to strengthen the Rome Statute system in its entirety. The recommendations stemming from this report and positively evaluated have started to be implemented by various bodies of the court. Here we do hope that tangible progress would be made which will lead to tangible results. The effectiveness of the ICC also depends on a number of aspects linked to financial resources. Here, I think it's crucial for the court to have appropriate financial resources commensurate with its mission, its aims, and its workload. All this combined to be really effective in the use of available resources by taking into consideration the economic situation in the world because of various crises recently, symbolized by the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian-Ukrainian conflict with their cascading repercussions. This is why Senegal welcomes the efforts of states parties to make contributions due to the budget of the court. I would like to take this opportunity to focus on the two fundamental pillars of the Rome Statute, cooperation and complementarity. Given the sovereign attributions of states, the ICC cannot function optimally, in particular conducting its investigations or interview witnesses or relocate them or collect evidence or conduct arrests without having necessary support. Thus, it's incumbent upon each and every one of us at the national level to cooperate fully so that it can achieve these aims. As co-facilitator of the Working Group on Cooperation, Senegal pays particular attention to all issues linked to this and participates in ongoing efforts made by all stakeholders to make the court more effective and more dynamic. As concerns complementarity, I'd like to commend the initiatives implemented by the court, including by the prosecutor's office, to further promote it both in Africa and in other continents. These actions have to be consolidated so that criminals can be tried at the national, regional level. Complementarity also requires appropriate transpositions of the provisions of the Rome Statute in domestic legislation of states. This enables national judicial authorities to have all necessary legal means to appropriately deal with the crimes stipulated by the statute. Before concluding, I would like to underscore that through its mandate to combat the impunity of perpetrators of the most serious international crimes, the ICC is contributing to a noble and important mission, namely to promote international peace and security, but also to protect human rights. It therefore embodies and complements the objectives of our universal organization. This merits all necessary efforts, and Senegal, as a state guided by the rule of law, will continue to lend its full support to this. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Jakub Kulhánek, Permanent Representative of the Czech Republic to the United Nations. You have the floor, Excellency.
Well, thank you, Madam President. Czechia fully aligns itself with the statement made by Spain on behalf of the European Union and its member states. And I would like to add some remarks in my national capacity. Let me start by expressing our gratitude to the outgoing President of the Assembly, Ms. Silvia Fernandez de Gurmendi, for her outstanding work on behalf of the state's parties. Our thanks go also to both Vice Presidents as well as all Bureau members. On this occasion, Czechia congratulates Her Excellency Ms. Pavia Kakuranta on her election as the President of the Assembly for the next term, as well as the newly elected Vice Presidents, and we wish the new presidency all the success in its challenging mission. You can count on our support. Czechia further expresses its sincere appreciation for the work of the outgoing judges, and we congratulate the newly elected ones. We wish to express our thanks to Judge Piotr Hofmanski, President of the Court, for his tireless leadership over the past years in very challenging times. Madam President, the Rome Statute turned 25 years this July. Over the time, the number of states parties reached 123, an impressive number indeed, and we congratulate Armenia on its decision to become the 124th state party. This number speaks for itself in terms of support for the court and to its mandate to end impunity for the most serious crimes. In this regard, let me reiterate that any threats or attacks against the court and its elected officials, its personnel, and all those cooperating with it are unacceptable and must be strongly condemned. The independence of the court to investigate and prosecute perpetrators of the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole in all situations constitutes a fundamental principle that needs to be defended and upheld. The International Criminal Court, as a court of the last resort, is fully based on the principle of complementarity. We welcome the deepening of the engagement of the Office of the Prosecutor with national authorities and other stakeholders in respective countries in order to close the impunity gap. We are of the opinion that this is the correct approach to complementarity, which will result in decreasing the overall financial and capacity burden placed on the court in the long term. The strengthening of national capacities should thus have a positive impact on the efficiency of the work of the court. The principles of complementarity and cooperation are interdependent. Full cooperation with the court in its investigation and prosecution of crimes within the court's jurisdiction is not only a legal obligation stemming from the Rome Statute or the United Nations Security Council resolutions, but a necessary precondition for holding trials before the court. We note that cooperation remains a challenge. In this regard, we would like to emphasize the importance of working together to prevent the recurrence of non-cooperative behavior, as well as to formulate an appropriate response when such instances occur. Furthermore, a broader meaning of cooperation itself is a multifaceted area which involves various partners and activities, including practical means such as the use of technology, aiming at increasing capacity of the court to deal with the demanding and complex situations within its jurisdiction. Madam President, with respect to the crime of aggression, we note with great interest the efforts to re-examine its jurisdictional regime for future situations, and we are ready to participate actively and constructively in this endeavor. The bottom line here should be ending impunity for this leadership crime in all situations for the future. Last but not least, we acknowledge the work of the Trust Fund for Victims, to which Czechia has been contributing since 2011. Supporting the work of the Trust Fund provides further means how to assist the court to fulfill its mandate. Finally, and most importantly, justice for victims is the raison d'etre of the court. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Yong-Kuk Wang, Permanent Representative of Republic of Korea to the United Nations. You have the floor, sir.
Madam President, I'd like to begin by thanking the President, the Vice Presidents, the Bureau, and the working groups, and the Secretariat of the Assembly for their preparations for this 22nd session of the Assembly of States Parties in New York. My delegation appreciates the joint efforts of the Presidency of the ICC, the Chambers, the Office of the Prosecutor, and the Registry to help end impunity for perpetrators of the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. We have been witnessing signs of a growing deterrent effect as a result of the Rome Statute, which has underpinned the international rules-based order over the past 25 years. Taking this opportunity, I'd like to warmly congratulate 6 newly elected ICC judges and express my sincere gratitude to all states parties for the valuable support that has been extended over the last 3 days for the election of our candidate, Mr. Ki Bong-baek. This election will remain in my memory for a long time, thanks to the fact that we had to go through the 11th round of voting. Since the process was harder and more dramatic than expected, you can be assured that Mr. Baek will work extra hard at the ICC. He will make significant contributions not only towards achieving international criminal justice in individual cases, but also in helping to address many of the court's ongoing challenges in managing its reputation, such as geographical distribution and working culture. Madam President, the Republic of Korea, together with the Netherlands, has been actively engaged in efforts to promote universality and the full implementation of the Rome Statute by reaching out to non-state parties. Universality is not just about expanding the ICC's territorial scope and the number of people under its jurisdiction. It is also crucial for enhancing the court's legitimacy, since increased ratifications signify broader international support, leading to more rigorous monitoring and oversight by a greater number of states. In this vein, I sincerely welcome the ratification of Armenia of the Rome Statute last month. Unfortunately, out of 123 states parties, only 19 are from the Asia-Pacific region. In this regard, we are actively involved in this important undertaking in various ways by reaching out to our Asian partners, such as through the ICC High-Level Asia-Pacific Seminar held in Seoul last month. Madam President, for the next 25 years and beyond, I'd like to highlight the urgent need to improve perceptions of the Rome Statute system. Indeed, there have been concerns that the court is biased towards the values of a particular regional group, and this is partly due to inequitable geographical distribution, not only in the composition of the states parties, but also in the personnel composition of the court itself. We have to recognize that inequitable geographical distribution can affect the diversity of perspectives of the court, raise perceived doubts about its independence and impartiality, and ultimately its universality, endangering the cooperation of the international community. It cannot be overemphasized how important it is that our investigative or judicial procedures are seen to be fair and impartial. Madam President, as a staunch supporter of the ICC, since its inception. The Republic of Korea will continue to play a constructive and active role to end impunity, implement restorative justice to victims, and ensure the rule of law. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Victor Garcia Toma, Permanent Representative of Peru to the United Nations. You have the floor, sir.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The representation of the Republic of Peru is grateful to President Silvia Fernandez de Gurmendi for the outstanding way in which she prepared for the 22nd session of the Assembly of States Parties. We are also pleased with her successor, Ms. Paivi Kaukoranta. We would point out that the decision taken by a significant group of states, including Peru, is laudable with regard to the creation of an international criminal court as a standing court with a universal calling, complementary to national jurisdictions, and with jurisdiction to try individuals presumed responsible for the most terrible crimes, such as crimes against humanity, genocide, and war crimes. The jurisdictional activity of the court is an incentive for the justice administrations of the states parties to the Rome Statute to tirelessly investigate the most inhumane crimes and put an end to violations of the human rights and international humanitarian law, and to sanction severely those who are responsible, as well as to provide reparations to victims of these hateful acts. It is a historic imperative to address these crimes against the community of humans because they are a threat to peace, security, and the well-being of our peoples. We need to adopt laws nationally and improve our cooperation internationally so that those who are responsible for such actions can be brought to justice. We must promote greater citizen understanding of the principles and values of this humanist culture. And these prosecutions are not to be carried out due to race, religion, etc. We must fight against that. This meeting is a good opportunity to renew our desire to put an end to impunity and to contribute to preventing the commission of such horrific crimes. Quite often, impunity creates a rather perverse environment. It leads to immorality, and these types of crimes are carried out by people who like to commit them and then hide in the shadows. So it is essential for us to serve justice speedily. We understand that the court recognizes this triple concept of justice. We must recognize the requirement for laws and address cases speedily. We must do this with a sense of proportionality and in line with the law, so that we can preserve the dignity of the person and improve human relations. We believe in the justice imparted by the court on 3 points: respect for the human being and sanctions for the most serious crimes. The implementation of the Rome Statute and assuring equality, reason, and proportionality in sentencing. Madam President, Peru is fully committed to the ICC and its mandate. Last year, therefore, we approved and ratified the amendments to the Rome Statute of the ICC on the crime of aggression and war crimes. I would also like to point out the fact that at the initiative of the Ambassador of Peru and Netherlands, on the 23rd of June, the court held a workshop on voluntary cooperation with the states parties of Latin America and the Caribbean. The purpose of that event was to promote cooperation between the court and the member states of GRULAC by considering various models of agreement. One result of that workshop was that Peru and the court have carried out a constructive dialogue with an aim to having an agreement on cooperation, which we hope to sign soon. We believe that there needs to be adequate representation and legitimacy in the bodies of the court, and we must promote diversity among the various regional groups which are part of the system. In this regard, we believe we must ensure equitable geographic distribution in the Bureau of the Court in order to strengthen this concept of intra-institutional justice. And at the same time, we welcome the outstanding work of our compatriot, Judge Luz del Carmen Ibanez Carranza, in her charges as the first Vice President of the Court. Madam President, the government of Peru is deeply concerned and emphatically rejects any measures adopted against the authorities of the court in the exercise of their mandate, and we reiterate our unwavering commitment and support for the officials and reaffirm our full trust in the independence and impartiality of the institution. I would conclude by expressing the common aspiration of all members of this Assembly that the impunity of some should not be a standing condition or aim. We must shed the light of justice everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Olivier Bell, Permanent Representative of Belgium to the international institutions in The Hague.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President, President of the Court, Prosecutor, Registrar, ladies and gentlemen, delegates. Belgium, first of all, thanks Spain for its statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We align ourselves with that statement and wish to make a number of comments in our national capacity. Belgium, first and foremost, hails Armenia that deposited its ratification instrument of the Rome Statute last month. In so doing, it will become the 124th state party from the 1st of February onwards. 25 years ago, we concluded an ambitious exercise by adopting the Rome Statute. This established the International Criminal Court, and it established a whole system to combat impunity. The role of states is crucial in this system. States are called upon to contribute by shouldering their responsibilities in the prosecution through their judicial authorities of the most serious crimes, and are obliged to cooperate with the court to allow it to discharge its mandate. We have gathered as an assembly today to take a series of decisions in furtherance of that goal. Over the last 2 days, we elected 6 new judges. Belgium congratulates those newly elected and has every faith in their ability to make a significant contribution to the judicial work of the court. Belgium was elected member of the Bureau for the coming 3 years. Alongside the new president, the new vice presidents, and the new members of the Bureau, we firmly intend to serve this assembly as best we can so that the best decisions possible are taken to ensure the smooth functioning of the court. We owe the court unwavering support in full respect for its independence and impartiality. The court and its staff have faced and continue to face threats. They face a series of unacceptable measures whose goal is to destabilize the institution and its staff, and recently the court has faced a large-scale attack against its IT system. Our support is vital, and we must do everything to preserve the court. Without stepping up the court's security and that of its staff, their activities cannot continue. But in supporting the court, we can't give the impression that we're favoring certain communities of victims to the detriment of others. Every victim must be heard and respected. The credibility of our system depends on it. My country tirelessly supports the court and has done so since its very first day. Some examples of this support: we timely we pay timely and sometimes in advance of the deadline our obligatory contribution to the annual budget. Today, we have disbursed an exceptional contribution to the tune of €500,000 to the trust fund of the court opened by the prosecutor. Recently, we've made a contribution of €530,000 to the victims fund, and we will make another contribution to that fund next year. We've made a voluntary contribution of €96,000 to the witness protection fund. We effectively cooperate with the court and have stepped up that cooperation by signing 10 bilateral agreements of enhanced cooperation with the primary bodies of the court. I have the pleasure to inform you that we've just signed a 10th agreement with the court referring to the storage of firearms and munitions and the use of training infrastructure on the territory of the Kingdom of Belgium. We implement the principle of complementarity because we're holding a number of trials trying the alleged perpetrators of grave crimes committed abroad. Despite the support of state parties and sometimes that of non-state parties, we note that every day horrific atrocities continue to be committed throughout the world. Far too many innocent victims are still trapped in the midst of armed conflicts and enduring inconceivable brutality. The deterrent effect that we hope to see by establishing the Rome Statute is woefully insufficient. The universalization of the statute has not been achieved either. Lessons must be learned, namely that of the need to prioritize quality over quantity. To strengthen the deterrent effect, we must also supplement the Rome Statute so that we include the new crimes in it that states didn't reach an agreement on in Rome. By consensus in 2010, between 2017 and 19, states adopted by consensus amendments to adopt a new definition of the crime of aggression and conditions in which the court would exercise its jurisdiction, and new crimes were added under Article 8 of the statute. These amendments will make the Rome Statute more attractive for states seeking to protect their victims as best as possible. My country calls upon states that have not ratified these amendments yet to do so to make them more effective. A side event on this matter has been organised on the margins of this event by Belgium, the Netherlands and others, and this will include 2 NGOs. Regarding the crime of aggression, states parties have committed during the review conference in Kampala to re-examining amendments 7 years after the beginning by the court of the exercise of its jurisdiction. This commitment in no way stops states from now beginning to think about how powerless the court sometimes is to take action against the alleged perpetrators of the crimes of aggression, given the restricted space it has in which to exercise its jurisdiction. We think we have the momentum there to think about a new amendment to the Rome Statute, which would allow us to prosecute the crime of aggression in conditions more close to those established for the 3 other crimes. My country also thinks we might think about introducing the crime of ecocide into the Rome Statute system. Unacceptable damage is being done to the environment, and that might constitute one of the most serious crimes that could affect the international community, so it could be inserted into the statute. The Belgian government has turned to the Parliament to submit an amendment to the Penal Code, and there we would insert the crime of ecocide. We wish to thank you for your commitment over the last 3 years, and you have contributed to making this assembly effective and productive to best serve the court. Over the last 3 years, you've also worked with another hat on, that of President of the Diplomatic Conference of Ljubljana in May 2023. At the end of that conference, a new treaty was adopted in terms of mutual judicial assistance and extradition for prosecution before national courts of the perpetrators of the most serious international crimes. That convention will allow states parties to more effectively discharge their primary responsibility, that is, to investigate crimes and to prosecute perpetrators at a national level. We call upon states to ratify this new convention, which will allow the principle of complementarity to be best implemented. Belgium has organised a side event on that event with a vast number of member states, and we invite you to it. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Alan Kessel, Assistant Deputy Minister of Legal Affairs of Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 25 years ago, states worked tirelessly to elaborate the Rome Statute, establishing the International Criminal Court. This collective achievement marked a pivotal moment in the history of international law. And together we created a permanent institution to help ensure the delivery of justice to victims and survivors of the most serious international crimes. The court has certainly come a long way since then. Indeed, this past year's activities have seen the court dealing with 15 active situations, 3 ongoing trials, and a 4th on which the judges are deliberating. This demonstrates the increasing level of states' needs and expectations for justice. In this regard, we recognize the work of all those who contribute to the court's achievements. To the outgoing judges, we commend your dedication and express our sincere appreciation for the valuable contributions you have made to the court. To President Hofmansky, we particularly applaud your leadership within the court's chambers. And to the new judges, we are confident that your diverse experience will greatly benefit the court. Madam Chair, today the court is under unprecedented threat. Arrest warrants have been issued against 7 of its high officials simply for carrying out the mandate that we, as states parties, entrusted to them. This is unacceptable. All states must respect the independence of the court. States parties must also ensure respect for the privileges and immunities of the court's elected officials, including after the expiry of their terms of office. Canada is also deeply concerned by the targeted, highly sophisticated, and ongoing attempts to compromise the court's cyber infrastructure. These acts of intimidation divert the court's resources and hinder its efforts to fulfill its core mandate. They also place the personnel and personal safety of witnesses and victims at risk. We thus support the court's efforts to improve the security and resilience of its digital systems. Madam Chair, continuous improvements of the court remain essential to ensure that it optimizes its resources in the fight against impunity. And Canada was pleased to work closely with many of you on several governance issues this year, including on legal aid, the travel expenditure reform, and the establishment of a permanent due diligence procedure for elected officials. This excellent collaboration is a testament to what we can achieve together. And we also appreciate the continued engagement with civil society, including with respect to the adoption of a vetting process for ICC elected officials and assembly sessions. Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, the principle of complementarity is a key pillar on which the court rests. It cannot be the role of the court to investigate all Rome Statute crimes when states parties have the capacity and the willingness to do so themselves. Strengthening the capacity of national jurisdictions to prosecute Rome Statute's crimes strengthens the Rome Statute system as a whole. We call on states that are not yet parties to ratify the statute and to contribute to delivering the promise of justice to more victims and survivors. In this respect, we applaud Armenia's recent ratification and welcome them as our newest state party.
Chair and Madam President, who is sitting in the audience. 2 thoughts before I conclude. Firstly, I'm incredibly humbled and in awe of the work done this ASP related to gender crimes. I was particularly pleased to support, together with the UK, Sweden, and Colombia, the prosecutor's launch of the revised policy on gender-based crimes. And the clear message is that hostage-taking, rape, mutilation, and desecration of women's bodies is never okay. Rape is never okay. Secondly, Madam President, at the opening of this session, my dear Sylvia, you asked the ASP and all of us here to contemplate our work and its impact. And in the silence that fell on this room, I did just that. And my thoughts focused on how many amazing children, women, and men in Darfur, Sudan would be alive today if only Omar al-Bashir would have been in The Hague since June 2015. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Claudio Troncoso Repetto, Director General of Legal Affairs of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile. You have the floor.
Señora Vicepresidenta.
Madam Vice President, members of the Bureau, distinguished delegates, we are grateful for the work done by the President of the Assembly of States Parties, Ms. Silvia Fernandez de Gormende, the Vice Presidents, members of the Bureau, the Assembly Secretariat, all of whom have carried out tireless work during a very complex year for the Court, during which the Court itself was a victim of a series of cyber attacks. We have seen an increase in arrest warrants and threats against its staff, and we condemn those actions most firmly. We also greet and congratulate the new Secretary General of the Court, Osvaldo Zavala, and the Executive Director of the Victims' Trust Fund, Deborah Ruiz Verduzco, on their recent appointments. As a member country of GRULAC, we're pleased to see that the Court and its subsidiary bodies have increased the number of senior posts staffed by professionals from our region. Undoubtedly, this represents progress in terms of representation. Without prejudice to that, the Court still has a debt to pay to our region, which is the most underrepresented among the staff. This year we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Rome Statute. We affirm our unconditional support and commitment to the Court. In the past 25 years, important progress has been achieved in combating impunity. The Court plays not just a key role in sanctioning the most serious crimes, but it also acts as a strong deterrent. And therefore, we deeply regret the fact that humanity continues to witness systematic violations of human rights and cruel armed conflicts in which international law is flagrantly violated. We firmly condemn the attacks by Hamas, as well as the repeated violations of international humanitarian law committed by Israel in the military operations in the Palestinian territory of Gaza, severely impacting the lives of civilians and innocents. My country also condemns the war of aggression against Ukraine, in which the norms of international law have also been violated. Chile expresses its support for the prosecutor and his team in investigations on these situations, and we urge him to further pursue those investigations. Madam President, in view of the complex issues before the Court, we must adopt measures to ensure its impartiality and transparency. Chile insists on the importance of the principle of complementarity as a fundamental pillar of the system. States parties are the first who should prosecute crimes under the Court's jurisdiction, and for that reason we must make sure that national courts have the necessary capacity and can act with due independence. That being said, we praise the efforts of the prosecutor to design strategies making it possible to strengthen cooperation with national authorities and civil society. We must also strengthen cooperation by states with the Court's investigations, and we would echo the many calls for cooperation by providing evidence and witnesses. Madam President, it is vital for Chile to ensure reparations to victims. We would underscore the work done by the trust fund benefiting some 17,000 victims in 2022. Access to justice, which includes reparations and reconciliations, must be a shared aspiration of all states, and we therefore call for increased support for that fund. Chile will continue to cooperate with this fund as we have done in recent years. We would also underscore the need to optimize mechanisms of cooperation between the court and the UN system, in particular the close relationship between the court and the Security Council, so that we can establish speedy channels for dialogue. Distinguished Vice President, Chile is firmly committed to implementing the Rome Statute and its amendments, as we have already ratified the 3 amendments adopted by the Assembly in 2017. At the same time, Chile reiterates its commitment to the universality of the Rome Statute as an effective tool in combating impunity. For that reason, we welcome the accession of Armenia, and we invite states which have not yet done so to follow that example. Madam President, turning to the work of this Assembly and its support for the work of the Court, we welcome the progress achieved in the review mechanism and the evaluation and implementation of the independent group of experts' recommendations. Although there are still pending tasks, we believe that the process has revitalized interaction between the court and the states parties. The work done by this mechanism is key to strengthen the work of the court, and we reiterate our commitment to this process in which Chile has been a focal point, and with the work of the court in general. And we will continue to support the court's work from the Bureau during the 2024 to 2026 period. Madam President, in particular, Chile welcomes the contribution of organized civil society and human rights defenders. The international community must ensure their security and safety, enable them to work free from restrictions, intimidation, or threats. And therefore, we welcome the guidelines and recommendations drafted by the Bureau to improve the safety and security of participants in the work of the Assembly. Finally, Chile sees and welcomes the court as a permanent, independent, and impartial court whose role is to provide key assistance to the international community to provide justice to victims in all contexts. In this regard, Chile reiterates its belief that all crimes under the jurisdiction of the court, which are carried out anywhere in the world without distinction, must be investigated, and those responsible must be sanctioned. Thank you very much, Vice President.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is Her Excellency Ms. Miriam Black, Head of Mission of the Embassy of Uganda in Brussels. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. The President of the Assembly of States Parties and Madam Vice President, Judge Hofmansky, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of my delegation, I take this opportunity to congratulate you for steering the business of this Assembly and upon successfully completing your mandate. We wish you the very best in your endeavors. I also take the opportunity to congratulate the incoming ASP President and the newly elected judges and wish them success in the execution of their important mandate. Madam President, you recall Uganda made the first referral to the ICC in December 2003. Unfortunately, the indicted Joseph Kony, leader of the Lord's Resistance Army, is still a fugitive. We therefore appeal for more resources, military, financially, and political, to apprehend Joseph Kony and bring him to justice, to provide closure to the thousands of victims. Madam President, we welcome the judgment in the Dominique Ongwen case, and it is our hope that the victims can move on to the reparations phase. We appeal to the states parties to consider increasing resources to support the work of the Trust Fund for Victims so that we can make justice achievable and meaningful. International justice is costly, yet as state parties, We are continually asking more of the court without matching these demands with a commensurate growth in the budget. We call upon this Assembly to commit to the court's global mandate by providing the court with financial, political, and practical support. Uganda is proud to be a co-facilitator, together with Australia, on the important cornerstone of international criminal justice, namely complementarity. Madam President, it is a valid argument that the court should not comment on the situation it is investigating. However, we see the Office of the Prosecutor very active in some situations with an overabundance of statements and declared engagements. Then we have the right to ask why. Why are situations which have been with the court for years not allocated due attention and resources? Why are situations characterized by impunity and continued crimes not a top priority for the court? Why are the most documented and protected situations of crimes and impunity in modern history sidelined and underfunded? Why is the access to court restricted to victims of current situations when the court's door is wide open to others? The prosecutor must take all necessary steps to ensure that all victims of the Rome Statute crimes are treated equally, and this should be reflected in the way that we respond to all catastrophic situations as long as our mandate permits the court's intervention. Madam President, my delegation with other African states has made several statements and pronouncements on the reallocation of seats in the Committee of Budget and Finance to reflect actual geographical representation as required by the Rome Statute. The Bureau was specifically requested to take corrective actions on the distribution of seats in the CBF. We welcomed that decision in December 2022 to establish the working group on the composition of the CBF. However, we deplore the fact that this injustice has not been addressed. Madam President, with respect to geographical representation and gender balance, Uganda joins the African group to request that the Assembly takes the required time to understand the issues and address them effectively, rather than rushing into a decision that will exacerbate the imbalances within the court. My delegation has significant difficulties accepting a costly experiment that may solidify a status quo based on exclusion and underrepresentation. Uganda has led the discussions on the GRGB in the court, and in this process, we have discovered several concerns that we believe should be addressed urgently. For instance, it took the court a whole 6 months to share the roadmap for the tenure policy, and then barely engaged states parties in the preparation of its proposed amendments to the staff rules and regulations. The only substantive presentation of the court's proposal took place on 22nd of November 2023, less than 2 weeks before this assembly. Critical feedback on proposals from states parties were introduced very late and could not be sufficiently appreciated because of the rush to meet the January 2024 deadline. The approach being proposed by the court on the introduction of tenure policy is therefore unwarranted, to say the least. Considering the deep operational and financial impact on the system, states parties should have been accorded an opportunity to negotiate the amendments exhaustively. Unfortunately, this has not been the case. Madam President, my delegation reiterates its support for the independent expert review report and looks forward to reflecting on the progress made on implementing the recommendations, especially the ones that require drastic action, such as addressing gender parity and geographical diversity gaps in high-level positions, as well as improving the efficiency of the court and dealing with predatory behavior at the court. The disproportionate representation in high-level positions from other regions but Africa is a major concern to us. The systematic failure to recruit Africans at high level indicates a clear failure to implement geographical distribution. This should be addressed promptly. Over the years, the African group has raised concerns, especially where evidence suggests that the selection processes are quite often compromised to accommodate less qualified candidates from other regions over and above highly qualified and experienced African candidates. This glaring injustice must stop forthwith. Madam President, I now wish to address the issue of recruitment of senior staff from non-states parties. This is a very serious concern for states parties because such senior personnel are given decision-making powers which should be the preserve of states parties. Needless to mention, non-states parties do not contribute to the court's budget. This is very disturbing. Madam President, allow me to conclude by reiterating my country's continued support for the court and by wishing everyone here great deliberations for the coming week. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is Her Excellency Ms. Sanita Pavluta Deslandes, Permanent Representative of Latvia to the United Nations. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, colleagues, I would like to commend and express my gratitude for the excellent preparation of the Assembly and the important work conducted by the President of the Assembly, the team of the Bureau, and the Secretariat. I would like to take this opportunity to especially thank the President of the Assembly of States Parties for her valuable contribution to the work of the International Criminal Court. Latvia further extends congratulations and conveys its full confidence in the recently elected 6 judges. Madam President, Latvia aligns itself with the statement delivered on behalf of the European Union and wishes to add a few brief remarks in its national capacity. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute. The International Criminal Court has been functioning as a well-established, esteemed institution promoting justice and the rule of law. Latvia strongly believes in the court's authority and the legitimacy of its decisions ensuring international criminal justice. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has been challenging the international rules-based order. The court has taken steps towards ensuring that those who commit the gravest crimes of international law should be brought before it. It has shown its ability by swiftly issuing arrest warrants for Vladimir Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova for the heinous crimes committed in the territory of Ukraine. And we encourage the court to continue its efforts and bring the perpetrators to justice. In the light of the aforementioned, international criminal justice can only be preserved with the cooperation of the states parties. We invite all states parties to assist the prosecutor and his office in the ongoing investigations and to surrender the alleged offenders to the court. To preserve the judicial integrity of the court and the Rome Statute system, state parties must stay united and denounce any attempts that undermine the court's crucial work in preserving international criminal justice. The court has Latvia's unwavering support. Latvia has provided the court with additional financial contributions and seconded an expert to assist the office of the prosecutor. It has also been significant importance for Latvia to contribute to the Trust Fund for Victims to ensure that those suffering from mass atrocities are especially provided for. Latvia calls on all states to make their financial contributions and offer additional support to the court in the fight against impunity. While mass atrocity crimes are being committed around the globe as we speak, Latvia cannot stress enough that the discussion on the revision of the Rome Statute and the crime of aggression is essential to tackle the accountability gap we currently encounter. Therefore, the necessity to establish new mechanisms that would complement and further strengthen the Rome Statute system are more needed than ever. Latvia also tirelessly continues to advocate for the establishment of special tribunal for the punishment of the crime of aggression against Ukraine. Latvia further invites all states that have not yet done so to accede to the Rome Statute and to consider ratifying the Kampala amendments on the crime of aggression. And we congratulate Armenia for joining the International Criminal Court in its goal to end impunity for the most serious crimes worldwide. Madam President, Latvia remains committed to continue working together with states parties and the court to ensure that the Rome Statute is universally accepted. It is our duty as state parties to persist in the battle against impunity, to seek justice and accountability to both past and present victims. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is Her Excellency Ms. Mitsuko Shino, Deputy Permanent Representative of Japan to the United Nations. You have the floor.
Madam President, it is an honor to address this Assembly of State Parties on behalf of the Government of Japan. We congratulate the Court's principals, the President, the prosecutors, and the Registrar on steering the Court through this year of the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute. In celebration of this landmark year, Japan is pleased to have facilitated discussions in New York with a focus on the role of the ICC by organizing such initiatives as a panel discussion in March, the UN Security Council Area Formula meeting in July, together with Switzerland, and most recently, a side event just yesterday. Believing in the vital importance of the rule of law and the fight against impunity over the last 25 years, Japan has been and will continue to be a staunch supporter of the ICC, not only with words, but also with practical contributions and assistance. Japan would also like to take this opportunity to note that this is the last assembly for ICC President Hofmansky and ASP President Fernandez de Grumendi. We thank President Hofmansky for his initiatives in improving the working environment, expediting the judicial proceedings, and promoting universality of the Rome Statute, just to name a few. A tremendous appreciation also goes to Madam President de Grumendi for her and her team's dedicated service to state parties. Without their dedication, we could not have come this far. Madam President, as the ICC intensifies its activities, constant review of organizational management is indispensable for it to function effectively as a permanent international criminal court. In this respect, let me highlight the following 3 points of urgent importance, which will be discussed at the present session of the ASB. First, the introduction of the tenure policy. As you recall, we adopted a resolution last year inviting the court to develop a detailed proposal for the tenure policy to be introduced from 1st January 2024. Adopting a system of tenure is essential to address stagnation of personnel transfers and revitalize the organization. Japan calls for the Assembly to approve at the ongoing session the introduction of the tenure policy without undue delay, believing that the court can rise to greater heights if it takes up this years-long challenges head-on. Second, equitable geographical representation. In order for the ICC to evolve as a truly universal institution with sound governance, it is imperative for an adequate number of people at all levels, from junior staff members to the principals, from across regions, to play effective role in the court. In this connection, taking its stand in favor of proposal by the African group to integrate geographical representation and gender balance concerns in the context of the tenure policy, Japan counts on the court's commitment to better represent the diversity of the international community. Third, an expeditious solution to the issue of the permanent absence of the judge, in tandem with what was addressed last year, namely the issue of the temporary absence of a judge. We should avoid a fundamental risk to an effective, efficient, and fair conduct of judicial proceedings in the event that the judge is permanently unable to continue sitting. Now, that an option identified as a way forward is being submitted for consideration, Japan calls for its adoption with the understanding that the option allowing for the replacement of a judge is consistent with the Rome Statute. State parties should proactively expedite the trial process by making a subsequent agreement regarding the interpretation of Article 74 of the Rome Statute. The ICC is an international organization as well as judicial body. With a view to reinforce its vital role, it is state parties that should spearhead the efforts to achieve ongoing comprehensive reform. To this end, the steady implementation of reforms is a matter of paramount importance. Japan will remain actively engaged in this endeavor. Madam President, given the context in which the court is currently operating, there is no denying the need to bolster the court's security infrastructure. I am pleased to announce on this occasion that an exceptional response to the rapidly evolving security landscape, Japan has very recently decided to provide a contribution to the Special Fund for Security. Let me also add that following from previous years, Japan will make an additional contribution to the Trust Fund for Victims. To conclude, we once again reaffirm our full confidence in the court as an independent and impartial court of law and renew our resolve to defend the principles and values enshrined in the Rome Statute, preserving the court's integrity underread by any threats. We reiterate our unwavering commitment to stand firmly by and strongly support the court, its officials and personnel, as well as those cooperating with it, together with other state parties. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Diego Pari Rodriguez, Permanent Representative of Bolivia to the United Nations. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. First of all, allow me to congratulate you on the sterling work you've done to lead the Assembly of the States Parties of the Rome Statute of the ICC in this session, as well as in previous sessions. President, distinguished delegates, the plurinational state of Bolivia, constitutionally declared to be a peace-loving state, reaffirms its commitment to justice and international law. In this framework, our commitment to cooperate with the ICC in its mandate as it seeks to prosecute those responsible for the most serious crimes affecting humankind, such as genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes of aggression. My country, convinced of the importance of international criminal law, has expressed its consent to abide by the main instruments in this field. Bolivia was present at the very negotiation of the Rome Statute and ratified it in 2002, in addition to ratifying the amendment on the crime of aggression, with the instrument of ratification being deposited in December of 2022. In the same vein, we are currently ratifying amendment to Article 8 of the Rome Statute, which incorporates new acts which themselves constitute war crimes. We are here, in so doing, expressing our consent to abide by the key instruments in this field. Moreover, I'd like to underscore that the Bolivian state, through its various organs of authority, has cooperated with the court when such assistance has been called for. Madam President, we recognize the important work and progress that has been made by the court in the last 5 years. However, we note that there is a need to step up efforts to achieve a more efficient court, a court which is able to expeditiously respond to the most pressing challenges put before it by humankind. Justice, and international justice more specifically, are not negotiable things. It is a right that individuals have and that peoples have simply because they are human beings. Consequently, the actions and decisions taken by the court must be outside any politicization and free of any geopolitical calculations and interference. States parties are obliged to protect the court's integrity, and we must always be vigilant in ensuring that the primary mandate of doing justice is discharged. Turning to other matters now, strengthening the court also involves strengthening the principles of complementarity. There is a need to achieve effective geographical representation, and there is a need to preserve diversity, multilingualism, and gender equality on the court. In the current juncture at which humankind stands, I would be remiss if I did not discuss the genocide that at this very moment is being visited upon the Palestinians in Gaza. According to data that has been published to date, more than 16,000 have been killed. 70% of those killed are women and children. Bolivia, in the General Assembly of the United Nations, has rejected the loss of life in any region of the world and the suffering of people, regardless of their nationality. As such, together with other nations of the globe, we have presented a request to the ICC, and we appeal to the court's prosecutor to expeditiously move to an independent and impartial investigation into the grave violations that have been committed or that may have been committed by any of the parties involved in this conflict. Moreover, Palestine is a state party to the Rome Statute, so that's even more important. Findings will be crucial to do justice for the victims of these crimes and will contribute to stability and international peace. Finally, Madam President, the plurinational state of Bolivia will continue working to strengthen the international order and the International Criminal Court. In so doing, we will guarantee universal access to international criminal justice. We appeal to all states that are not yet parties to the Rome Statute to accede to it in a timely fashion. We urge states parties to continue to strengthen the court through the ratification of its primary instruments and by cooperating with it when necessary. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Sergio França Danese, Permanent Representative of Brazil to the United Nations. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you. Señora Presidenta, agradezco.
Madam President, I am grateful for the leadership shown by President Silvia Fernandez de Gurmendi over the last 3 years at the helm of the Assembly of States Parties and within the Bureau of the ICC.
Thank the Vice Presidents for their invaluable contribution to the working groups of the Assembly, both in New York and in The Hague. I congratulate the 6 judges elected this week for 9-year terms in the International Criminal Court, as well as the new President, Vice Presidents, and members of the Bureau elected for the next triennial mandate. While convinced of the remarkable merit of the members of the Bureau, we regret that its composition does not reflect the necessary equitable geographical distribution. The largest regional groups in the court, the African and Latin American states parties, are not properly represented in the body. The geographical imbalance also affects the Asia-Pacific states. The underrepresentation of a very large portion of the membership in the governance of the ICC occurs in parallel with an ever-increasing budget. This is incompatible with the economic reality of a number of states parties and the UN system at large. In our perspective, the tendency of steady rises in the requested resources is neither reasonable nor sustainable, especially when there is no corresponding increase in the effectiveness of the court. Now is the time to enhance the participation of the Global South in the institutional structure of the ICC, including in the Bureau and in the Committee of Budget and Finance. Madam President, this Assembly of States Parties takes place at a critical juncture for the International Criminal Court. It provides us with an opportunity to discuss the future of the court and the challenges facing it today. We must address selectivity and double standards. Victims of equally atrocious crimes must not be treated differently according to their nationality. Full support and expeditiousness in relation to some investigations, in contrast with protracted proceedings in respect of other situations, may suggest bias towards victims. Priorities must always be based on the interests of justice and no other. The court's credibility and legitimacy depend on it. The office of the prosecutor, states parties, and judges, including those elected this week, have a key role in ensuring that all victims of the most serious crimes have equal access to justice. The difficulty to achieve universality is another matter of concern. 25 years have passed since the Rome Conference, and we are still less than 2/3 of the international community. We must seriously reflect on the reasons why states hesitate to join in. And we must overcome the challenges associated with cooperation. As the court has no enforcement jurisdiction or bodies, it relies solely on the cooperation of states to fulfill its mandate. As the ICC is a treaty-based court and the Rome Statute is governed by the law of treaties, there should be no doubt that it can only create obligations for states parties. In our resolve to put an end to impunity, we shall be guided by the principles of the United Nations, such as the peaceful settlement of disputes, and respect our obligations under international law. It is essential that requests for cooperation be fully consistent with the Rome Statute, especially its Part 9, including Article 98. The importance of coherence in the international legal system is a must. The work of the court may be jeopardized by the so-called fragmentation of international law. In this regard, my delegation encouraged the judges to engage in constructive dialogue with other international tribunals, especially the International Court of Justice, in different topics of general international law, including immunity of state officials from foreign criminal jurisdiction. Madam President, as a founding member of the Court, Brazil reiterates its deep-rooted commitment to international law and international justice. We reaffirm our belief that the international community and the ICC will be able to overcome the challenges outlined above. The Rome Statute and the ICC have been a milestone in the history of international law. Let us ensure that the Court remains faithful to the original intentions that inspired its creation. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Niklas Kebon, Deputy Director General and Head of the Department of International Law and Human Rights of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sweden. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Sweden aligns itself with the statement made by Spain on behalf of the European Union and its member states and has the honor to add a few elements in its own national capacity. Let me begin by following others before me in expressing our sincere appreciation to Mrs. Fernandez de Gourmendi for her very capable leadership of the Assembly of States Parties over the few years past, and not least her hard work in mobilizing support for the independence and integrity of the court. We congratulate the newly elected president, Mrs. Päivi Kakuranta, and the other newly appointed Bureau members. Sweden also wishes to congratulate the 6 newly elected judges. The election of judges with high moral character, impartiality and integrity is vital to ensuring a well-functioning and independent court. Madam President, international law is central to Swedish foreign policy. Maintaining a rules-based international environment is a national interest, including accountability for serious international crimes, regardless of the geographical context. That is also why Sweden has seconded several highly experienced investigators and prosecutors to the Office of the Prosecutor. These secondments are unearmarked and are benefiting the court across all situations, across several continents. In the current political climate in which the ICC and indeed the rules-based international order as such are being subject to threats and attacks, it is imperative that state parties continue to manifest their support for the integrity and independence of the court. Sweden remains firm in its defense of the court. We condemn in the strongest terms the criminal proceedings initiated by the authorities of the Russian Federation against the prosecutor, the president, and other judges of the court. Sweden also strongly condemns the cyber attack on the court. Civil society organizations were instrumental in the creation of the court, and they continue to play a crucial role. Threats and intimidation directed at them are also unacceptable. Madam President, the primary duty to prevent and respond to international crimes lies with states. The complementary nature of the ICC is the very core of the Rome Statute system. Swedish courts have convicted perpetrators of serious international crimes committed in Rwanda, the former Yugoslavia, Syria, and Iraq. Additional investigations are ongoing. The key to successful prosecution of such crimes has been the establishment of specialized war crimes units. The secondment program is an important tool in strengthening the cooperation and complementarity between the ICC and national investigations. The court is faced with an ever-increasing workload. Ongoing investigations cover almost all regions of the world. The expectations on the court are high. To deliver on its mandate, the court needs resources that match its workload. All states parties have a legal obligation to pay their contributions in full and on time. Sweden considers the trust fund for victims essential to making the court's justice a reality for victims, their families, and affected communities. I'm proud to say that Sweden has been the largest contributor to the fund. The fund relies on voluntary contributions to fulfill its mandate. The heavier workload of the court signifies more work for the fund. We call on all states to consider contributing to the fund to enable it to deliver reparation and assistance to victims of the most serious crimes. States' full cooperation with the court is essential for its ability to carry out its mandate. The outstanding arrest warrants for fugitives from international justice must be promptly executed. Madam President, we commend the progress made in the review process of the Rome Statute system. We encourage the ICC and state parties to continue engaging in the implementation of the recommendations of the independent experts. We place particular importance on promoting a healthy and inclusive working in a culture, and we urge the leadership of the court to do its utmost to combat existing problems. Madam President, a lot has been done by civil society, the presidency of the court, and state parties to honor the court's achievements and advocate for global support and the universal ratification of the Rome Statute. We welcome Armenia as the 124th state party to the ICC and urge all states that have not yet done so to consider signing and ratifying the Rome Statute. This year's 25th anniversary of the Rome Statute has provided an occasion for the international community to highlight the work and the role of the ICC. The creation of the ICC was a historic achievement for the advancement of international criminal justice. The accomplishments are significant and include landmark judgments, not least on gender-based crimes. Sweden is committed to continue working together with all partners to further the work of the ICC and strengthen the system of international criminal justice. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker is Her Excellency, Ms. Georgina Guillen-Grillo, Director General for Foreign Policy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica. You have the floor, ma'am.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. A good afternoon to you, Madam President, Excellencies, delegates. Costa Rica welcomes the holding of this assembly and takes the opportunity to reaffirm its resolute support for the ICC. This assembly constitutes an opportunity to have candid, direct discussions on the crucial role that the court plays and must continue to play in all situations which may constitute crimes within the court's jurisdiction. This year, as we mark the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute, it is more necessary than ever before for us to express our fervent support for the work of the prosecutor and their office. We must commit to providing to the court the financial, political, and operative support it requires to discharge its entire mandate. That includes providing adequate resources through the regular budget. My country is aware of the dynamic discussions underway on the court's budget, and we agree that the court should establish goals for efficient expenditure. However, the discussion on the budget cannot turn into a mechanism which undermines the court's mandate. We must remain cognizant of the fact that without stable, predictable, and sufficient resources for the court, the international community is imperiling its primary tool to prevent atrocities. Investment in justice always produces results. The efficiency and effectiveness of the court crucially depends on states parties cooperating with it, because this cooperation is vital if we are to achieve the fundamental goal of tackling impunity and providing justice to victims. States parties must also support the court so that it can tackle the issue of double standards in victims' access to justice. The court's legitimacy, the ICC's legitimacy, that is, depends on the uniform, consistent, and coherent implementation of its authority and mandates. All victims deserve the same protection. These victims, who unfortunately in various parts of the world continue to endure inconceivable atrocities which startle our human conscience, must be our primary concern and must be placed at the heart of our work. Moreover, Costa Rica reiterates its deep concern at actions which attempt to undermine the court's mandate by way of attacks on or threats against judges, prosecutors, civil servants, and states that cooperate with it. We reaffirm the fact that we have every faith in the court as an independent, impartial court, and we believe that this assembly will act as an opportunity for us to renew our determination to defend the principles and values enshrined in the statute, preserving the court's integrity and without allowing intimidation or threats against the court. We hope we'll see the Assembly do that. We urge the Assembly's Bureau to condemn in a timely, fervent fashion any action against the physical integrity of judges. We hope that this Assembly will adopt a robust, resolute resolution supporting elected officials and the civil servants working within the court. President Fernandez de Silva, I wish to thank you for your conviction regarding the struggle against international impunity. Since the 90s, you have championed the adoption of the statute and the subsequent creation of the court. You have led that court in a sterling fashion. We also congratulate you on the flawless work you've done as President of the Assembly. Moreover, I congratulate Osvaldo Cervala of Ecuador on his election as the first registrar from a developing country. We wish you every success in your work, particularly in view of the complex context in which you're taking up this post. Registrar, sir, you can count on Costa Rica's support. Moreover, we welcome the appointment of Dr. Verduzco as Executive Director of the Trust Fund for Victims. With your wealth of experience on this issue, we know that the fund will achieve its goal of contributing to giving hope and dignity to survivors. Madam President, the international criminal justice system and its crucial component, the International Criminal Court, are today at a crucial juncture. There are powerful actors that are attempting to undermine this system. There's no doubt about that. To ultimately achieve the goals for which the court was established, states must uphold our obligation to cooperate with the court, including arresting those suspected of committing crimes within the court's jurisdiction. Without cooperation, the court cannot discharge its duties. Without cooperation, the court doesn't fail, states fail. Cooperating with the court must never jeopardize the lives of people that are seeking justice and the respect of fundamental rights and freedoms of others, including civil society and human rights defenders. Moreover, for Costa Rica, it is vital that there be a reform of the Rome Statute to broaden the court's jurisdiction when it comes to the crime of aggression, with the goal of bringing this statute in line with the jurisdiction it has for the other 3 core crimes. Madam President, victims that today continue to painfully endure atrocities throughout the world must be our chief concern. As such, we welcome the fact that the redress has been issued in the Katanga case. This is an example of successful reparatory justice, and we praise the increases to voluntary contributions made to redress and programs to help victims. Lastly, because there can be no peace without justice, we must continue to promote the values enshrined within the Rome Statute in a resolute, consistent fashion with a view to achieving its universality. Before concluding, I must say how satisfied we are and how much we congratulate the Republic of Armenia for having acceded to the Rome Statute. We hope that this act of trust encourages so many other countries to join this great family of states committed to the very best values of humankind. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Richard Galbavy, Acting Head of the Permanent Mission of Slovakia to the United Nations. You have the floor.
Madam President, Slovakia aligns itself with the statement delivered earlier by Spain on behalf of the European Union and its member states. I shall begin by expressing our gratitude and highest appreciation to the outgoing President of the Court, Judge Piotr Hofmansky, as well as the President and the Vice Presidents of the Assembly for their dedication and the leadership over the last 3 years. My delegation also commends them for their commitment to the review process and improving the functioning of the Court and the Rome Statute system in general. Our gratitude also goes to the outgoing Director of the Secretariat, Mr. Renan Viasis, for his professional service to the Assembly and the state parties. I would like to further congratulate Mr. Osvaldo Zavala-Hiller for his selection as the new Registrar of the Court earlier this year and wish him a successful term in office. Madam President, this year marks the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute, the Court's founding treaty. The experience of the past 25 years, including the developments last year, fully demonstrate the importance of international criminal justice and the Court's indispensable role in its architecture. We are extremely concerned about this year's unprecedented attacks and threats against the Court, its officials and staff members, and others who cooperate with it, including civil society and human rights defenders, for no other reason than carrying out their mandate and pursuing the fundamental interests of justice. I want to emphasize that such attacks and threats are unacceptable, and Slovakia stands firmly behind the Court in its support. These threats and attacks must in no way affect the Court's activities, its integrity, independence, and impartiality, the core pillars this international judicial body is built upon. We are prepared to support any meaningful measures to enhance the standards of security of the Court, including for outgoing judges. Madam President, Slovakia welcomes the considerable progress achieved this year in investigations and prosecutions in situations around the world. However, the court cannot fully deliver on its mandate without the adequate support from state parties when it comes to effective cooperation, political support, and promotion of universality. In view of this, I should like to make 3 points. First of all, I would like to point out that the implementation of arrest warrants remains one of the fundamental challenges before the court. In this regard, Slovakia calls on state parties to the Rome Statute and, where applicable, other relevant stakeholders to provide necessary cooperation and assistance for the execution. Secondly, considering the challenging conditions as well as the amount of external pressure under which the court operates, political support at all relevant fora, including at the United Nations, is crucial. Finally, you will recall that 25 years ago, the establishment of this court represented the promise of universal justice, which is why we must continue to encourage states that are not yet parties to the Rome Statute, its amendments, or the Agreement on Privileges and Immunities to ratify and implement them. It is in this context that we welcome Armenia's ratification of the Rome Statute and call on others to follow suit swiftly. Furthermore, I wish to add that Slovakia welcomes the outcomes of the review process and remains committed to further strengthening the Rome Statute system. We have actively contributed to the reform of legal aid and of the procedure for nomination of and election of judges, and we advocate for the review of the Kampala Amendment to ensure unified jurisdictional regime of all 4 ICC crimes. In conclusion, Madam President, I would like to reiterate Slovakia's continued support for the work of the ICC and assure you of our readiness to work constructively with you and all participants throughout this assembly session. Before concluding, I would also like to congratulate the 6 elected judges and as well as the incoming bureau. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is Her Excellency Ms. Lachezara Stojeva, Permanent Representative of Bulgaria to the United Nations. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, Bulgaria aligns itself with the statement delivered on behalf of the European Union, and I would like to make a few additional remarks in my national capacity. The International Criminal Court represents one of the main pillars of the rules-based international order, and Bulgaria welcomes its continued efforts to strengthen the Rome Statute system and advance the international criminal justice. We welcome in this regard the progress of the review process and call upon states parties to uphold and reaffirm their commitment to the Rome Statute system through the implementation of the recommendations of the independent expert review. It is the states parties' obligation to support the independence of the International Criminal Court when it is challenged. During the busiest period ever in terms of its investigative and judicial workload, our support is much needed, and we join others in condemning the recent cyber attack and the threats against the elected officials and staff members of the court. Bulgaria commends the joint efforts of the Presidency, the Chambers, the Office of the Prosecutor, and the Registry to put an end to impunity for the perpetrators of the most heinous crimes of concern into the international community. Bulgaria underlines the importance of pursuing perpetrators of international crimes. Without accountability, crimes will continue and impunity will persist, undermining the legitimacy and the prospects for future peace and reconciliation. Expanding the ICC's jurisdiction over the crime of aggression would also provide the international community with an important tool to fight impunity and strengthen deterrence against the illegal use of force. Furthermore, the universality is indispensable for the work and development of the court and to strengthening prevention, criminal accountability, and justice. Therefore, we should spare no efforts to promote the universality of the statute. The ability of the courts to successfully deliver on its mandate and contribute to bringing international justice is dependent upon the support of states, and we urge all states to cooperate with the ICC to implement its decisions, including in ensuring respect for arrest warrants issued by the court. The principles of complementarity and cooperation are 2 important pillars of the Rome Statute system, and we welcome the Court's active engagement with states through capacity building with the aim to strengthen national legal systems. We highly value the role of the Trust Fund for Victims and its important mandate to deliver reparative justice to the victims and affected communities. In this respect, we are pleased to announce that this year Bulgaria made a voluntary contribution to the fund. Bulgaria takes note of the concerns expressed by the Budget and Finance Committee regarding the pending liquidity issues. It is essential that all states parties pay their assessed contributions in a timely manner, and we join others in calling upon states in arrears to settle their outstanding contributions. Madam President, the Court has set important milestones in the development of international criminal justice. As we mark this year the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute, we reiterate our steadfast support for the Court as an independent and impartial judicial system. And in conclusion, I would also like to join those who congratulated the 6 elected judges. You have a big task in front of you, and I wish you every success. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Carlos Amorín, Permanent Representative of Uruguay to the United Nations. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Y muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Distinguished President of the Assembly, Court authorities, Excellencies, representatives of civil society. Firstly, the delegation of Uruguay would like to extend a special thanks to the outgoing President, Dr. Silvia Fernandez-Garmendi, and the outgoing Vice Presidents, Mr. Keith Ray and Ms. Katarina Sekentsova, for their hard work over the past 3 years, during which they led the Assembly of the States Parties skillfully and with leadership, given the various challenges they faced. We also wish every success to the incoming President, Ms. Päivi Kaukoranta, as well as to the new Vice Presidents, and we assure you that Uruguay remains at your disposal to continue working towards the goals in the Rome Statute. We also congratulate the new members elected to the Bureau this session. This year we commemorate the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute. This is a milestone in our collective search for justice and accountability. Having said that, Uruguay once again reiterates its firm commitment to the noble work of the ICC as it works to combat impunity for those who are accountable for the most serious international crimes. In 2023, Uruguay deposited its instrument of ratification to all of the amendments to the Rome Statute in the area of Article 124 of the statute on the transitional provision. Therefore, I apologize, says the speakers. We also endorse the deletion of Article 124 of the statute on the transitional provision, broadening the scope of the treaty, strengthening its mandate, and ensuring efficiency. The ratification to amendments of the statute highlights the importance which states give to the independent and impartial work of this court in a complex multilateral context replete with challenges which threatens international peace and security, and therefore Uruguay encourages states parties to ratify the corresponding amendments. In the same spirit, Uruguay has participated actively with an aim to contributing to perfecting and strengthening the Rome Statute system. We need proper and effective functioning of the court, and that cannot be ensured without due state cooperation, which will enable the court to carry out its activities satisfactorily. To that end, states parties must adopt in their legislations the implementation of provisions on cooperation with the court and also endorse the mandates of the statute and align their national jurisdictions with them. In the case of Uruguay, we have a pioneering law for cooperation with the ICC. It's Bill 18.026, and it is comprehensive in nature since it covers all of the international legal obligations in the area of human rights and international humanitarian law. It also provides for mechanisms of cooperation between our national authorities, the bodies of the court, as a whole, and it also establishes a participatory national process for the appointment of candidates to the positions of judge or prosecutor. Madam President, in April of this year, a new registrar to the court from Chile, Dr. Osvaldo Zabila Aguilar, was appointed, and we take this opportunity to congratulate him publicly for his election, and we join our efforts in ensuring that we achieve the goals of the Rome Statute. We also welcome the active work of Prosecutor Karim Khan, recognizing the high number of preliminary reviews, investigations, and cases which his team is still dealing with. The increased activity of the court, although challenging, illustrates that the Rome Statute system is fully valid and relevant in today's world. This year, we've had the adoption, or the election rather, of 6 judges to the court, and we are firmly convinced that all of these elected judges will carry out their functions with impartiality and professionalism, bearing in mind the provisions of Article 36 of the Rome Statute. Madam President, focusing on victims is a very important element in the Rome Statute. We must ensure their participation in various proceedings as well as their right to reparations. In this regard, we would highlight the important work of the Victims' Trust Fund. It is another fundamental pillar in the system of the statute. We also welcome this year the appointment of Ms. Debra Ruiz Verduzco as the Executive Director of the Fund, and we hope to continue working cooperatively with her team. Uruguay is also grateful to the various organizations from civil society supporting the important work of the court and underscoring the importance of having effective communication between the court, the states parties, and civil society. Madam President, in conclusion, one important challenge to strengthening the Rome Statute is ensuring full universality, and for that reason we call upon states which are not yet parties to the statute to accede to it so that we can ensure effectiveness of this instrument and guarantee that it is a standing jurisdictional body to prosecute the most serious international crimes, as well as to guide national criminal legislation and bring it in line with international law. We also welcome states which have ratified the statute this year. By way of conclusion, we are firmly committed to the work of the court, which for more than 20 years has become now a necessary institution for those of us who believe in a world governed by the rules of international law and guided by the high values in the Rome Statute. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. Now I give the floor to the last speaker on my list for this morning, His Excellency Mr. Henk Cor van der Kwast, Permanent Representative of the Netherlands to the International Criminal Court. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed. And I have to say, Excellencies, dear colleagues, although I'm the last speaker, there are a number of points that are not very original. But I think it's still important to make them, because this court has been characterized, and also this assembly, by a number of people that have done a lot of things for it. And seeing you here, Madam President, is also a good place, and I want to start by thanking you for all the work you have done, particularly in The Hague, but also here today. Many thanks. I want also to congratulate the 6 new judges after a long and painful process to serve on the court. At the same time, we would like to thank the outgoing judges for their contributions. Special thanks in particular to President Hofmanski for standing firm despite the attacks on the court, other judges, and against himself. We would also like to thank the new registrar for his excellent start in very difficult circumstances. Finally, many thanks to President Fernandes de Gourmendi for her outstanding leadership. The Netherlands has been privileged to work with you for many years, both in the framework of the ASP and beyond. Since the Rome Statute entered into force in 2002, the number of states has more than doubled. This year, we welcomed Armenia's ratification of the statute, and we look forward to work with Armenia. At a time when the most fundamental legal norms are flagrantly violated in various regions of the world, it is up to all states to go beyond pious words, outspoken here easily, but that have to be followed up by actions. We have to strengthen the international criminal justice system in the practice. I mention a few key areas for further improvement. First, earlier this year, the Ljubljana, The Hague Convention was adopted in Slovenia. This convention is a landmark treaty that will facilitate international cooperation in the domestic investigation and prosecution of international crimes. It's important that as many states as possible sign and ratify it, and we invite you all to sign the convention on the 14th of February next year at the Peace Palace in The Hague. Second, we must ensure that the ICC is given full jurisdiction over the crime of aggression. As Russia's war in Ukraine proves, this is the leadership crime without which so many other crimes would not be committed. We must close this gap in the ICC's jurisdiction. Third, state parties should actively engage in assisting the ICC by offering voluntary cooperation. For instance, in cooperating with the court on witness relocation, receiving released persons and enforcing sentences. Fourth, it is a shared responsibility of the states to protect the court and to provide sufficient financial resources for ensuring the security of the court and its officials. Any threats or attacks against the ICC, its information system, its elected officials or its personnel are unacceptable. The Kingdom of the Netherlands therefore condemns in the strongest term the issuance of arrest warrants by the authorities of the Russian Federation against ICC principals and judges. We are at the same time deeply concerned by the recent cybersecurity incident against the court's digital information systems, and we are equally concerned about all other attempts to undermine the international mandate and functioning of the court. Finally, the court needs an adequate budget to have the impact for which it was all created. The opening of investigation into the situation in Ukraine has put a serious strain on its capacity, potentially affecting all other investigations. To address this, the Netherlands had pledged a voluntary contribution of €3 million. The heartbreaking events in Israel and in the Palestinian territories that ensued after Hamas' terrorist attack of 7 October are also likely to have a major impact on the capacity of the court. Because of that, the Netherlands has decided to strengthen the court in its researches and to pledge another voluntary contribution of €3 million. The Kingdom of the Netherlands is convinced that the court, with the strong support of state parties and the valuable contributions of civil organizations, will be able to play a key role in prosecuting the international crimes that have shocked the world. You can count on the unwavering support of the Netherlands, both in its capacity as host state and as a state party. And I have kept this table all the time to see that it's so important to keep the court strength. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. In fact, I would like to thank all the speakers for their statements presented this morning and also for the support pledged to the court. We will reconvene to continue this agenda item this afternoon with statements from state parties. Our first speaker in the afternoon will be the Deputy Attorney General of Tanzania, followed by representatives of Sierra Leone and then Romania. I would like to thank the interpreters for extending their interpretation services today. Thank you. Unless there are any requests for the floor, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, thank you, thank you.